Oh yeah, yeah.
Focus
Well,
on
and
the
it,
Family. They when they do their movie reviews, they tell you exactly how many GD combos are in
Hmm.
movies because that's the worst.
and I
Yep.
appreciate whoever like sacrificed their own innocence to
To
make that
count all
review,
those, yeah.
to keep a tally sheet. Do you think that they had like an Excel file like up and ready to go where they could just like tally them up?
They had to sit in the back seat with a dimmer all the way down on their laptop. They're like, "Oh, this is
Oh, and for
important
sure,
work."
like after a point, like the person probably just was like, "There's 50. No one on the site's gonna watch it. They're not gonna count them. It's fine."
Actually, there was 4 instances of nudity.
Yeah.
I vividly remember.
They're not even going to the movies. They're just like purchasing the scripts online for 15
Yeah.
bucks so they can.
Reading.
Right. Yeah.
I
Just
read
like,
the script to Spy Kids 2.
yeah. I mean, I just did find word in on the PDF of the script of Spy Kids 2. But yes.
Dude, life hack.
Yeah.
Afterlife hack. Okay. Stuff the halls with missing money. Fa la 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 la. Crimes exposed by leaky plumbing. Fa la 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 la.
Okay.
Pray this doesn't curtail donations. Fa la 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 la. Bribe your viewers with more salvation. I can't do it. I'm sorry, that was terrible.
That's the choice. You sat and wrote that.
I did, yeah. That's a whole morning. Welcome to Growing Up Christian. I'm Casey.
I'm Sam. And this isn't usually a musical podcast.
We promise we're done with that.
Casey promises. I claim no part of that. And if you liked it, I still don't, because that's just that's between you and Casey.
Yeah, mention it in your 2-star review on iTunes.
Yeah.
So, as the carol alludes to, we got to talk about our boy Joel Osteen, my former boss, Joel Osteen.
Your former boss?
Yeah, I did.
Your call
for
center.
him.
Yeah, that's right. You worked.
I mean, it was
his,
indirectly, but I called him boss. You know,
and you called him specifically on the phone a number of times until he filed that restraining order.
Right. So this is a weird story. It's actually it's
don't forget to use the word allegedly a lot.
Right. It's surprising, but like it seems pretty cut and dry to me, like from the details. But basically, there was a loose toilet at the Lakewood Church. It's Lakewood, right?
I think so. What year? What year is this? Is this a fresh?
Oh, this is like happened last week.
Okay,
so
I wasn't sure if the story came out or if it happened earlier and someone's just talking about it now.
Well, how it got there happened in 2014, but like this past like week or something here, a guy called into a local radio show, and he was talking about how there was this loose toilet at the Lakewood Church, and he got called in. He's a plumber, so he got called in to make the repair, right? He said that they had some of the tile pulled off the wall and stuff like that by the time he got there. So this guy gets to working and he pulls back some insulation, and there's like envelopes behind it. And there's like hundreds of envelopes stuffed back into the wall behind the insulation. And so, you know, he reported, dude, why'd you say anything? Like, just take it.
I know. Just take it. Envelopes full of cash.
It's not like finding a $20 bill like in the checkout line at Walmart or something like that, where you're like, oh, somebody's gonna miss this if I don't tell. Like,
yeah, just I don't know. Osteen's not gonna miss it. He probably forgot it was there. He was like, I'll put this here for safekeeping. But later on, he just had so much money. It's like when you find a 20 in your coat pocket the next year, like winter rolls by. The next winter rolls up and you're like, oh shit, I didn't know this was still in here. And it feels like you just made $20. That's like his version of that.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that's part of what I've heard a lot of conjecture about. So the envelopes that were stuffed into the wall, there was hundreds of them. It's like $600,000 worth of cash.
Holy
shit. But therein lies the interesting part. So this is cash and checks, which sounds to me like apparently it went missing in 2014 from the safe that's in the church. Like, did your dad was he ever like a deacon?
No, I mean, not really. I don't think. Wait, is that where
Okay.
you take the money? You count the money and shit?
Yeah, deacons just get to do all the like crappy administrative work within the church. And whenever there's a hard decision to be made, like the deacons get to make it so the pastor doesn't have to take responsibility
yeah.
for it.
I thought the elders all like grouped together and made those decisions. It's kind of like deacons are representatives, elders are senators, pastors the president. That's isn't that the
I
structure?
think our church didn't have elders. We just had deacons.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
Yeah.
Talk about centralizing power into one figure.
Yeah, that's what we're about.
The Apostle Paul would have been very disappointed. Church. I'm going to have to. Someone should probably talk to them.
Yeah, well, he sucks and he made up his own little alien abduction story and no one cares. But so like I remember when my dad was a deacon because he did it for a couple of different churches. He always ends up like anything my dad does. Eventually, someone is going to be like, "Hey, you think you can be in charge of this?" Which is a burden, you know.
That's funny. But some people are just like that. I mean, obviously he started his own company and runs that well. It's like some people who have that mindset, that business mindset. That's what, honestly, to derail real quick, that's why church often becomes a problem, because the people who can grow a church are the ones who are like business savvy. They have that mindset. And it's like, that's why it always just turns into a business. Like, let's make smart decisions, financially savvy decisions for the sake of investing and growing. It's like, it just turns into that, like building a nonprofit of some sorts, as opposed to like functioning the way that maybe it was intended.
Yeah, I think everything in life functions the same way. It's like if it's not growing, it's dying.
Yeah, well, and I guess particularly in a capitalist society, that's the mindset that people like. You can't just. It's funny because I have a friend who once asked me about the church that I go to and asked like why. Oh, it's not like your church hasn't really grown much. I was like, I don't know, because we don't try to grow it. Like there are certain messages that grow churches and certain ones that don't. There's certain areas and lines you don't cross if you want to grow your church. There's certain ways you structure things or set up your music if you want to grow. Like it's all written down in books. Just like every church planter knows like the ins and outs of the right moves to make to grow a church. Like people have written it all down. And it's like, so then you either choose to go down that path or you don't. And that still seems to come from, that does seem to come from that mindset of like, because it hasn't grown at all, it's essentially dying. And
like a hipster church.
Or you just don't have to, you could just show up and keep doing the same thing for a long time. And if everyone likes it and is cool with it, great. Like growing it actually would just probably line the pastor's pocket with more money, not really do much for anyone else.
Well, I'm sure they see it as like the more this grows, the more people we're touching and impacting and all of that kind of stuff.
Right. When salvation's the end goal of it, you commercialize and your religion, basically. It's like,
right.
That's the problem. That's what we actively hated about it after a while. We're all just products. We're all just like means to an end or some shit like that.
Well, Joe knows how to grow church for sure.
Yeah, he sure fucking does.
And it starts with great veneers.
And a big ass smile. And a little bit of Botox.
Well, so in 2014, money, all these envelopes and stuff go missing from this safe within the church. And like, oh, that's what I was saying. So like, I remember when I was a little kid, I like tagged along with my dad a couple of times at this. We went to a big Southern Baptist church, altar calls every Sunday. I've talked about this.
Yep.
But, every Sunday they would take up a donation and stuff, just like every other church. And all of the plates and stuff would go back to this back room, and all of the deacons or like ushers or whatever they were for that week would sit there and count the money and organize it and stuff like that, and
into
it was
two piles. There was like one for the church, one for me, one for the church, one for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like Bank of America, they get in the cut.
Yeah. Perfect.
But, it's a lot of different crap all thrown on the table, and it all has to be sorted out, And I'm thinking like, the fact that that there was checks in these envelopes. I mean, this is from 2014. What good is a check from 2014?
Yeah, I don't think any good. What's the expiration date on a check?
I feel like a lot of times it's 90 days.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I might be off. I've written like 4 checks in the past 10 years, but I know it has an expiration date. So like whoever stole this intended on getting that money out of there before that time, or they had a very short window of time to get the money out of the safe and somewhere. They didn't have enough time to get it out of the building, or maybe they couldn't do it, quietly without drawing attention and suspicion and stuff.
So I think blew out a wall, peeled back the insulation, and repaired it real quick. I mean, how is that? Was there some work going on over there originally?
Maybe, maybe that was an addition at the time or something. That would be interesting to find out, is like what was going on with that section of the building at that time.
Yeah. Let's pull some permits. Let's do some gangster capitalism style investigative journalism here.
I do want to point out that this is the exact plot of Blue Streak with Martin Lawrence.
Is it? I feel like there's some plot lines taken from the Righteous Gemstones from this too, maybe? Is that
it is the plot line. Like his life is the plot line.
Yeah, I know. That's true. Anything involving Osteen's gonna have some Righteous Gemstone vibes.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Blue Streak with Martin Lawrence, it may be a little late for you. That seemed like the funniest movie ever when I was 10. Shout out to Jesse. I watched it at his house a whole bunch of times.
The only place you watched movies that you weren't normally allowed to watch.
But I think that this was somebody that it had to be somebody who had access to the safe, who could open it. And I'm sure there's a list of people that can do that, right? But
yeah,
whoever this was, they intended to go get that money out of those walls earlier than this, and they just must not have had the window. Or maybe it's one of those things that happens in churches, which I think we're going to touch on in a minute, where like they didn't necessarily have the proof to pin it on Brother Tom, but everybody kind of knew it had to be him. So maybe whoever they suspected of it lost access to those privileges afterwards.
Yeah. But it's hard to imagine there aren't cameras set up throughout that bill. 2016, it's 5 years ago. It's not like, he's been obviously huge for our entire lives. I can't imagine that there aren't cameras. I need to look into this story more. I'm pulling some blueprints. I'm pulling some building permits. That's for sure. I bet that's public access. We're going to find out what's going on here, and I'm going to collect my reward.
I think what doesn't make sense in terms of explaining this, and what I've heard floated a lot, is that this is somehow like Joel Osteen, like squirreling away packs of money as some sort of like a bug out plan, or maybe just to siphon it off the church. Like $600,000 in cash and worthless checks now is not much money to Joel Osteen.
No, that is how much he spent on his Bentley. Come on.
Right. This is all of this stuff was taken from two days. It was a 2-day period that all the checks are from, apparently. So like this is a weekend.
That's wild, dude. Yeah. That's literally like, that's how much they're the amount that they're pulling in on a weekly basis, like every time they have an offering.
Well, and how much of what they pull in on a weekly basis comes from the congregation in the building? It's all phone stuff. I know, dude. I squeezed a lot of money out of, poor senior citizens during my time as an Osteen evangelist.
God, did you do outgoing calls, or did you just take calls from people?
I just took incoming calls.
Okay.
And I forget who the other guy that I did. I did like some overnight shifts where it wasn't Joel Osteen. It was another guy.
Yes, I know which one you're talking about. And I can't remember the pastor either. It's another like big mega church ministry kind of thing.
And like in my brain, I want to say it was Kenneth Copeland, but I don't know that it was.
Yeah, I don't think that's who it was. Is that the one that people would call in and say shit that was kind of scary sometimes? Like that they basically maybe you should call a suicide hotline and not some fucking undergraduate idiot who's taking calls at a service center.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And like, the other people that I did incoming calls from, and this is a very short period of time. This was not a job that you stayed at for 6 months or a year. Like this was
No.
I need money. This place is hiring. I can suck it up. I can do this. And then like 3 weeks later, you're like, I can't do this.
Eats you. I didn't do one of those ones. I think I've already talked about it a bit, but I did. I worked for a place called Civic Development Group. They ended up getting shut down because of the number of federal laws they were violating. And I remember reading in the paper when they got shut down because the dude who started it, they talked about all of his assets that were seized, and I saw a picture of his property. It was fucking wild. Like this guy made bank, and it was like all raising money for like random like firefighter, cop, or like emergency transport services kind of services, but it wasn't for those departments. It would be like the teddy bear drive that the officers do every year. They would outsource to Civic Development Group, and then you would call people and they'd be like, how much of my money goes to it? And you're like, well, at least 10%. And then the rest goes to like Civic Development Group. And that was one of those like, I was giving blood. I was selling my blood plasma the day that someone was like, look, man, you're probably here because you need a job. This is going to be the number one worst job you'll ever have, but they will hire you the day you walk in the building. He's like, so if you need money, do it. He's like, I just quit today. It's terrible.
I literally just gave myself the flu for $30. So yeah, I can do it. Whatever it is, I can do it.
But that was another one of those soul crushing, like, you're like, yeah, I can do that. And most people last like 2 or 3 weeks before they just are ready to just die in that chair.
Yeah. I met some cool people a little bit that I worked there, but yeah, it was rough, man. Like the other people that I took calls for besides Joel Osteen, they had 2 phone numbers. They had a merchandising number and a prayer number, right? So if you wanted to talk to somebody, you call the prayer number and you would talk to someone that's like with the church or something.
That was the last time you prayed publicly, right?
Right. Joel's only got 1 number. Or at least he did at the time. I don't know what it looks like now, but so we're
you could probably afford 2 now.
I would think, but we're a group of like desperate college kids there to try to make a buck. They don't ask you if you're a Christian. Like obviously that's not a part of the hiring process, and a lot of the people there weren't. They were just random kids that needed a job or whatever. So part of what you had to do for Joel's line when you're taking calls is like you had to kind of go through the pageantry of, hey, well, do you have any prayer requests or something like that? And you could pray with them if you wanted, or you could say, I will pass this on to our prayer line, and it went into the data bank or whatever. But
you waited on hold for 15 minutes listening to elevator music before someone could speak the word of the Lord over you.
Right. And like the people that were calling in, it was a lot of desperate people and sad people, like people who are lonely, home, stuck at home. Like it was a lot of that kind of things. And
old ladies that got stuck in homes and their grandkids and children don't come to visit them anymore. And they just want someone to talk to.
Like most of this audience is relatives.
They just keep you on the phone, Casey. You're on for like 20 minutes every day with the same lady. She calls at 3:15 after she has her pudding cup.
They're in that home with Ben Stiller as the male nurse. But yeah, these people would call in and they're sometimes crying, sometimes they're just like, it's obvious that they're desperate. And like 90% of the time, it's like, I'm in over my head and my debt, and I've got, I'm not sure what's going to happen to my house and stuff. Because I mean, this is 2008 into 2009.
Oh,
it's the bad time, if you remember. And so there's a lot of those people calling in, and like you could tell when he had preached a quote unquote sermon about like prosperity stuff.
Seed money, bitch.
Oh yeah. They would use that language. They would be like, I want to do what Pastor Osteen said. I want to rebuke the spirit of poverty, and I want to welcome in the spirit of prosperity. And I would like to pledge $100 a month to Pastor Joel. It's like,
Oh
you
my
just told me
god,
you
that's
can't pay your
should be
mortgage, pal.
criminal, dude.
I mean, it's what are you going to do? I mean, these are people that were going to give that money to somebody. This is like, it's like playing the lottery. It's like I'm throwing a Hail Mary and hoping maybe God tosses me some cash for my mortgage, or maybe the bank loses my paperwork or something. You know?
You're
It
just
felt
so much
awful
better
for
off.
him.
It's like lower. I mean, your potential for returns higher if you actually just play the lottery.
Yeah, it's yeah, it was rough. I didn't last very long, but so yeah, I don't know. I think when you look at the amount of money coming in, the lifestyle we know that Osteen lives,
Yeah,
it just everything about this case, when you look at it, doesn't make sense that this is somehow like Joel's little,
no,
hideaway stash that he put a bunch of like faulty checks and 300 grand in cash, and that's peanuts to this guy.
no. It's some Robin Hood type that planned on keeping all the money for themselves. But
Yeah,
that's all.
they did give the plumber after the story became public and stuff. They gave the plumber 20 grand for reporting it.
Really?
Yeah, so there's that.
I mean, that's kind of dope. It's I wouldn't complain about that. I mean, maybe you're like, look, how much? There's 600,000 there, and you haven't had it for 5 years. You didn't even know you were missing it. Like what? But you're right. Why didn't he just go like take a few of those envelopes? Be like, hey, I just found $500,000 on the wall. Like,
well, maybe he did. Maybe he
yeah,
found $800,000.
Maybe he did. Yeah,
This is what got sent back to the lost and found department.
exactly. That's awesome. Good for him. Maybe there's more money in the walls. We should probably tear down the entire building to find out. I think that's the only option we have going forward.
Every person who works at a mega church is just going to be like poking holes over in the stall from now on. Like, maybe
they get like a spike and just like every like 3 feet, they just pound a hole and peek through the wall. And they're like, nope, move on.
Got any coins in there? No, that's just the glory hole.
We don't. Yeah, we don't have to. No, not that one. No. You'll lose an eye.
So,
oh my god!
Not
Speaking
the only famous person. Not the only evangelical mogul in the news this week.
No, I think it's worth a quick touch upon that Josh Duggar has been convicted on a lot of counts of child pornography. I mean, he's probably going away for close to 20 years. Is what I think is what he's seen. Yeah, dude, Josh has had an interesting run, right? Because obviously a number of years ago, he was the one that it came out that he had been sexually abusing his siblings for a while. And I don't really know the details of that. But I know the family talked to their church. The church kind of sat on that information for a few months before telling the cops. And I don't really know where it went from there. I know it was about a year after that, the Mr. Duggar. What's the dad's first name? Do you remember?
I don't know. Pete.
Whatever. Mr. Duggar. It was like a year later that he ended up telling the authorities. So I'm not sure how they tried to. I don't really remember how they tried to handle that. But then deals with all that shit, and then it was really funny when the Ashley Madison leak happened. His name was one of the ones that was on that list.
This guy has had egg on his face so many times. He's such a dunce.
Yeah, he was trying to have like a political career, wasn't he? Was he?
Yeah, he was trying. He was getting into. Where do they live? They live in Utah. Is it?
I think so.
Yeah, he was involved in like the Republican Party in the state that they live in. I think I'm not.
Jim Bob is the dad's name. That's right. That is the perfect name for
real. His name is Jim Bob.
That's some straight out of the Walton. Was it the Waltons? Was that old TV show where everyone said goodnight to each other at the end? Good night, Jim Bob.
It's like a boring Western.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never watched the show that they had, but
I didn't either.
I went into like a YouTube hole one day where, Fundy Friday did an episode on the Duggars. And so I watched hers, which is really good. You should go watch it if you're curious about all these people. But kind of went down a rabbit hole on him for like a few days. And I mean, when you look at his past behavior, when you listen to him talk, when you see some of the things that he did during his like political career and stuff, the guy he's obviously a psychopath. Like there's no human emotion in there. Like this is a person that uses people without any thought to, you know, the ramifications of, or, you know, the damage that he could do.
Yeah. I mean, oh dude, apparently like, even though the allegations and the stuff that he dealt with had to do with basically assaulting his siblings, apparently there were several other minors that accused him of touching them while they were sleeping or awake. Like he's been at this for a little bit. And dude, I think what's strange about this kind of stuff, right, is it happened when he was a kid. He was a teenager of like 14. I think he was like 14, but I really hope this doesn't come off as trying to make any excuses, because I absolutely would never go out of my way to do that. But we don't have a society that's set up to really deal with that, right? So like at 14 years old, when you report that to the police and you go, this is what's happening, like there's something clearly broken about that kid. Maybe he had some sort of sexual abuse as a kid from someone somewhere. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he's the or originator of that cycle. But what is really fucked is like the parents can't be like, this is what we're dealing with. There needs to be something. We only have legal ramifications for stuff like that. I don't really know what you do with that kind of a broken brain. You don't send them to a professional or a specialist. Like I don't know what kind of help exists for that type of
Well, I
stuff.
think there's some resources, you know. I don't know about where they live. I mean, maybe there isn't a doctor qualified to talk about that kind of thing, but
yeah,
there's counseling and therapy and all of that kind of stuff available. I think like, yeah, I mean, you have to acknowledge like what a horrible position you would be in to find something out like this about your kids. But what I wonder is like, they waited so long to report it to the police.
Yeah.
What made them report it to the police? Was it another instance? Did they think that the word was going to get out and they were trying to get ahead of it from a PR standpoint? Like,
it probably had to do with more accusations. Maybe they heard about it and hope, oh, this is bad, but maybe we'll just talk about it and then this stuff won't happen anymore. Like it's an intentional, it's like a willful act of like, you're just kind of in denial, I think. Like you're hoping that, oh, this is something, we'll talk about it, and then it just won't happen anymore. Like, and you're not admitting that if someone is doing that, then there's something very wrong.
yeah.
That doesn't, you don't just go, okay, you're right. Thanks for pointing out that that's wrong. I'm done now. I'm better. Like I don't know that this is a great connection to make, but we'll see. It's like when you're 13 years old and your parents will like catch you jerking off and they go, hey, don't do that. You're like, okay, I won't. You're going to do it again as soon as you're, but that's healthy sexual behavior, right? You add in deviance, but like, so now you have a sexual deviance to you. But what you're going to do is say, okay. And then you're going to do that again, because for some reason, humans just, whatever your base sexual desires are, they don't just turn those off when they get to a point of deviance and then say they're better, in the same way that you don't, when they're healthy, you don't just turn them off. So if
there's no healthy outlet for normal sexual impulses and stuff, people will find an unhealthy one.
And I'm not convinced I think that's true with fetishism, like with certain fetishes and things like that. But I'm not convinced that like deviance in that way, like underage kids, that feels like it's just something different than like, let me just, then their body's finding an unhealthy sexual outlet. Like, I feel like there's got to be something else going on. Like, if that was the case, get into like sex swings and gag balls and like whatever, find your shit. But
I think it's like
stuff feels different.
It's the point at which like a person that doesn't have normal impulse control. And like, I'm telling you, I honestly think that the guy is a psychopath. I'm not just using that as like a slur or anything like that. Like, I literally think just like from looking at his behavior and the way he talks and stuff like that, like, I don't think this guy has empathy for other people.
I don't
And
think.
when
I think you're right.
when you're that kind of person, you don't care what the consequences are for the people around you. Like, there's not a thought that crosses your mind about like, well, this is an awful thing to do to my sibling, or what is this going to do to them long term? Like, you don't think those things. You just do what
Yeah.
you want. And I think like whether or not there was indicators that he was a sexual deviant, like as a youngster, there was definitely indicators that he didn't have any empathy for his
Yes.
you know,
Yeah,
other people.
definitely.
I think there's
Well,
a
then you look
weird
at
thing
his
too.
Ashley Madison stuff, and then like, what I feel like there was something else that had some other issues that had come up with him and his wife that she just kind of had to deal with because he was, a piece of shit.
Oh
And
man,
it's just
poor
like
woman.
I know I feel bad for her too, right? She's stuck in like in this situation.
She's stuck with him through.
And she doesn't believe in
least some of it.
divorce, so she's just gonna stay married to this guy. Like, yeah, there's definitely something wrong with him. He definitely deserves a sentence. And what's even crazier, something's coming up now with like his sister Jaina, is she's been charged with let's see, what was the charge? Had to do with harming or charged with
child
endangering a minor is what it was. So I don't know. Maybe she was watching her neighbor's kids. Her neighbor's kids came over, I think, and her brother Josh was also visiting. She was like, "Hey, I'm just gonna run to the store real quick. Josh, do you mind watching the kids for a few minutes?" So
we're gonna let Josh host the annual pizza and Lord of the Rings church lock-in or something.
Yeah, we can do it at my house. I'm just gonna run out and pick up some more Mountain Dew. Josh, you got this, right? Perfect.
Dude, what's weird about these situations that doesn't make any sense from the outside? Like, there's a lot of things that don't make any sense about it, but like, what is it about like, okay, this specific type of situation where you got a bunch of kids, okay, and you care about all your kids and you want what's right and best and stuff for all of them, right? One of the kids does something heinous that's a danger to the other children, right? Why does it always look like from the outside that they think more about how to like protect that kid from long-term damage from this whole thing than they do about protecting the other kids? Like, because that was part of the thought process, is like, man, what if I help my son at 14 or 16 or whatever as like a pedophile or something? Like, what's it going to do to him long term if word gets out and stuff? Like that played into the decision making here. But
yeah,
shouldn't
definitely.
your motivation first and foremost be like, he made a choice, I have to protect my other kids from him first, before anything else?
Yeah, you would think. I mean, as a parent, I'm not sure like how you would handle that. Like if one of your kids ends up doing something awful, I could see that distinct drive and desire to want to protect them, because as a parent, you love your kid. You go, look, they're not a bad kid. That's what every parent will say. Talk to the parents whose kids shot up a school or some shit like that. Like, they're like, parents are, well, maybe not always. We actually didn't even touch on the most recent school shooting, I don't think.
Oh my God.
We don't have time for that now, but it's like I feel like parents you'll always hear them go to the defense of their kids. Everyone who's in jail, like for whatever crimes, it's like, look, he's not a bad kid. He got mixed up with the wrong crowd. He made a bad decision. So like, there's that very natural defense of your kids that I think will allow you to be blind at any point.
Ted Bundy's mom maintained his innocence like to the end till he confessed. So
crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, I can see it. I can see it as a parent that you would like that would be your biggest blind spot. Like you would throw anybody to the wolves. Your own siblings, if something happened, it could be easier to let that like have it stay in court. But like kids, man, it's different. I feel like that would loving parents who actually love their kids, that would be their biggest blind spot. So if one of my kids did something awful as a teenager and you're like maybe they hurt somebody in school, but you're like, at home, they're always great. I mean, but with Josh, there are probably some other signs. I don't know. Like you said, there seems to be a lack of empathy there. But when you do love your kids and then the perpetration is like, is that the right word? When the whatever the act is against a sibling, you're like, that's when it gets so weird, because
There's
it's
a
like
lot of
you're
overlapping
disproportionately
emotions
applying that blindness or that love, because you do want to. I don't know, but then what's the option? We have to kick this kid out and remove him from our house and put him in a place where he can't hurt people. Do
yeah,
we
literally,
set
like
up
nobody likes to
cameras?
say
Like,
it. Nobody
what are
likes
the
to say this,
options?
but sometimes you just have to throw a kid away.
Yeah,
You
just put him in the
gotta
trash.
just get rid of him. Like when I was a kid in Georgia, sometimes people would get a pet and then realize that having a pet is a lot of work and responsibility, and they would just let it go.
Yeah,
Like they just take it
that's
somewhere
how.
and let it go, which is awful. But sometimes you can't do that with a pedophile. I guess
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
irresponsible to let him
that's
go. I guess it's irresponsible to let your dog go. Maybe that's why we trashed that idea.
yeah, probably. But there is a play. I don't know, man. Maybe that's what we have to figure out as a society. When you find out someone's a pedophile, what do you do? Because you're not just going to be like, hey, could you stop? Perfect. Now we're in a good place. That's why they come up with all these like laws of like, you're not allowed to be near kids. But like, you have to set up societal parameters that don't let, but even repercussions for breaking those orders, right? People do like those don't make them stop. So it's like, is there a place that you can, I don't know. Maybe they need their own island. I don't
Dude,
know.
that's what this
Just brainstorming.
Elon Musk Mars colony is going to be. It's going to be a penal colony like Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah. Oh my god. Okay, I feel like we've been going on for this forever. Aaron Sprinkle is our guest this week. He's awesome. It was so fun to talk to Aaron. Aaron is like a big time producer for Tooth and Nail, or was a big time producer for Tooth and Nail. That's where he really started out. I mean, there wasn't a band in high school that I listened to that he didn't touch. Amberland, Emery, Project 86,
Demon Hunter.
Yeah, huge with
Copeland,
Demon Hunter. But yeah,
May.
he's worked with yep. He's worked with, Newfound Glory as later, and some of their later music, produced one of their albums. Like he's been around the block when it comes to the music industry. And he's also has his own solo project. Unfortunately, when this is coming out, he'll have just played the first show he's played in a while, but I'm sure I'll have some other stuff coming up. It was such a fun conversation. It was kind of the first time he really kind of dove deep into some of his disbeliefs now and his deconstruction as someone who's been involved in the Christian music scene and seen a lot, and but hasn't really gotten into the specifics of his personal story so much. So we had so much fun talking to him. He was someone you connected with instantly, so it was very casual conversation, a lot of joking around, and those are the ones that I enjoy the best. So
yeah, ton of fun. So enjoy our conversation with Aaron Sprinkle, but first, a word from our sponsor. 'Tis the season to be jolly, and nothing makes me more jolly than a great cup of coffee. You know what I'm talking about?
I certainly do, Casey.
So my house this time of year, I turn the heat down at night because I like it to be like a frosty 66. And waking up in the morning, stepping out into the kitchen at 5:30, it's chilly.
You got your long underwear on. You got the flap open in the back, all unbuttoned with your little booty hanging out.
Rosy cheeks, 2 sets, top and bottom.
They look freshly spanked, but it's just because it's
cold. My poor pets. Nothing wakes me up better than a cup of hot Captain Cecil's coffee. And, during the fall, I was really into the Knopsk blend. I just got a new shipment in, and I gotta say, the limited edition holiday blend is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, I gotta say it must be amateur hour in here, because you talked about it being a frosty 66, and I set my thermostat to a frosty 62.
That's like a Siberian gulag.
It's cold. You wake up in the morning and you don't want to get out of bed, but you have to. Get your pot of coffee going, and of course, I'm drinking Captain Cecil's. Captain Cecil's donates 10% of all sales to various lighthouse preservation organizations across New England. It's one way for them to make sure that they remain with us for generations. And as a New Englander, that's super important. New lighthouses around here, big deal. they're landmarks. And I know you don't know anything about lighthouses because you don't have them. You just have windmills, the lighthouses of the Midwest.
Yeah, we have like grain elevators. Not quite as scenic, but same thing.
Yeah.
The holidays are right around the corner, and there's no better gift for the coffee lovers in your family than Captain Cecil's. And they're offering a special deal to our lovely listeners. From now until Christmas, you can go to CaptainCecils.com and enter the promo code GrowingUpChristian at checkout for 20% off your order. Now until Christmas. It's a deal you don't want to miss. So go to CaptainCecilsCoffee.com and enter the promo code GrowingUpChristian at checkout for 20% off your order. Happy holidays from me, from Sam, and from Captain Cecil's Coffee.
Hey, everybody, we're back with our guest, Aaron Sprinkle. Aaron, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for us. I'm super excited to talk to you. I mean, I don't think there's a band that I listened to in high school that you didn't touch. So it's it's gonna be cool to hear your story. I know you've been involved in the music industry for quite some time, but we're also curious to learn a little bit about you and your life.
Yeah, I grew up on an island just right near Seattle. This little teeny island was ferries only, no bridges, and
sick.
It was
maybe
like
not fun for you as a kid.
No,
awesome.
really, it was awesome, and Seattle was very accessible. Like you could take a boat and be there within 30 minutes.
Okay.
Saddle a halibut.
Yeah. But my parents were products of like the Jesus movement in the 70s. They were like hippies that got saved kind of right before. I think they got married and then became Christians and then had me pretty quickly within maybe a couple years or a year or something like that.
I'm so fascinated by that time, not to derail already, but because there's so many people whose like parents got saved. Like the Jesus movement was big, right? And a lot of people in their early 20s, were your parents like what, in their early 20s when that hit for them? Were they in it then?
Yeah. No, my dad was like 20, I think. Yeah.
Okay. It's stuck with so many people. And I think what's wild about it is thinking about, it was kind of a charismatic movement, like pre-charismatic movement maybe, but you don't look around you now and seeing a lot of people in their 20s getting swept up in any sort of Christian culture, right? It's it hit such a, I've always been so curious as to like why it hit the way that it did. I have yet to talk to anyone who knows enough about it, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Mean, I know what I know about it from them, and from it definitely permeated the entire culture of the church that I grew up in too, was a byproduct of it as well. And I think it was sort of like this aftermath of the Summer of Love, basically. It was like kind of like these, wandering, lost hippies that were tired of whatever they were doing. And, it was such an era of like spiritual seeking in general too. Like it was like hip to be like trying to find your guru or your whatever, and find your way. And, I mean, I personally think it was just like really, really well organized cult.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's my takeaway from it right now. Like they knew exactly what to say and how to get people, reeled in. And I mean, if you I even 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have said this, but looking back on it all now, just from what I know, I mean, it's literally textbook cult behavior that was happening.
Well,
so, yeah.
and there was so many like cult splinter groups that formed out of that. Like, look at all of the, like, you just look at podcasts about cults, like the vast majority of them, if they took place in the US, they have some sort of tie to the Jesus movement.
Yep.
It was like
absolutely 100%.
People are like primed and ready and looking for, they were just like so ready for like, it was like that. They were enamored with like that whole concept of a guru.
Yep.
And in some ways it was an Eastern religion thing. And in some ways it permeated all of it. And so many of them, it's weird because it was like the opposite of fundamentalist Christianity today, in that like people took pieces of Christianity that fit their narrative and incorporated them in, but kind of mixed in with like a Buddhist or Eastern
Right.
religion sort of. It was like a milkshake made of all of those things.
Yeah, and one of the really important kind of messages of that era that continued on, and it's, I think, still really present today, but it's been technically kind of watered down, is like, this isn't my parents' Jesus. This isn't my parents' religion. In fact, this isn't a religion. This is a relationship. This is about, this is sort of like, it was like almost like a rebellion against like legalism and like, all that stuff. And, that's, I think, what resonated with that generation, because, they definitely didn't want their parents' brand of religion. That was obviously not working. Yeah. Or just any like strict sort of fundamentalist kind of thing. But the thing is it, at least in my anecdotal experience, like, it eventually sort of just always becomes the same thing. I mean, it might look a little bit different from the outside, but it eventually becomes the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's a good point, man.
Yeah, it's interesting, but yeah.
So you're growing up on an island. Your parents are fresh off the Jesus movement.
Yeah, and it was also because it was like kind of a hippie hub, that island. It was very like artistically focused, like it's just a bunch of like, not just, but a lot of hippie kids, and just the arts in general were very encouraged, and like kind of finding your own path was very encouraged. I actually talked on Labeled about this too. It was like this really weird situation, like culturally, like not normal, weird.
Yeah. Was it like a small number of people on this island?
Yeah, I think that
midnight mass level.
Not quite that small. That is
any vampires showing up in the middle of the night.
Such a great show. Well, I don't know. I think I feel like it was like maybe 4,000 people. Like,
okay,
like my high school, my graduating class was 100 people. So like, and I probably went
Pretty
to
small.
kindergarten with like 60 of those 100 people. So it was like, like a very tight, small community. And actually,
born and raised.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you know of the author Frank Peretti or the book This Present Darkness, but
yes.
He's
very familiar.
He's from Vashon, the island. I knew him when I was a kid, and the name of the island was Vashon, and that's actually where he got the name Ashton. The books are actually kind of based on the island that I grew up on.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one that I remember the most is like The Oath. Do you remember that one?
Yeah,
the weird little town in the mountains and stuff.
Yeah.
That was kind of like an insular community, sort of cut off from everybody else.
Yeah, like we went to church with him when I was a kid, and like he would do like worship at church and stuff like that.
No way.
Yeah, it's really funny.
Was he already writing then?
I don't remember. I was pretty young. I remember when like the first book came out, and my parents were really excited about it and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember.
No, I enjoyed Wetting the Bed to him.
Yeah,
nice.
You definitely remember Frank Peretti, dude. That's weird.
It's a different kind of wet. Oh. It was a soaked dream,
less sticky.
Okay.
Misunderstood.
It's funny because like some of those things where you look at like we talked about like parallel institutions in our childhood version of Christianity. Like Christian music is one of them.
Yeah,
but like even within those parallel institutions, like finding things where you're like, I don't know about this. And I remember reading like a couple of his books and being like, this might be just a little too much for me.
This might be over the line. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And then, like, when I graduated in 92, so the grunge Seattle thing was like in full swing, like 91, 92. So that, definitely, there was an energy in the air. And we moved to Seattle like right when I graduated, basically, actually a couple months before technically, but
your family, or did you take off?
My family. Yeah. I lived with them for a little while, and about another year. Well, and then more off and on, but that's another story. I got married when I was 19 in 1993, and my ex-wife was 17. which, that was also, that was happening. That was a thing that was happening in the church, It
Yeah.
was like, like it was totally fine. Like nobody was like, oh, maybe that's not a good idea. They were like,
maybe
oh,
wait a couple of years, see how
yeah.
you still feel. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to come off like with any disrespect towards my ex-wife. I need to be really clear about that. But
for sure.
But so this is, I think, pretty important. So my parents were Young Life leaders, like really early on, and then when I was in like middle school, my dad, we were going to church in Seattle. We would commute over to go to a Calvary Chapel. I don't know if you're familiar with Calvary Chapel, but
Yeah.
it's a West Coast thing that is literally a product of the Jesus movement. Actually, like the Vineyard and Calvary Chapel came out of the same little group of people that started this like little Jesus hippie church back in the day. And it was a big church. It was like, I think there was like 4,000 members of the church or something like that. And eventually my dad became employed as the junior high youth pastor. Like when I was in junior high, like my dad was my youth pastor. Like
that's weird.
But it was like my whole life, like the whole culture. Like we were taking the boat into Seattle for church like 2 or 3 times a week, and the church was like incredibly music focused too. It was like, it was a cool church. Like, it was like, you could dress however you wanted. And, they didn't think rock and roll was satanic or whatever. And
that was kind of one of their selling points. So wasn't that Calvary Chapel? They did a lot with like, a lot of music came out of Calvary Chapel churches.
Yeah. Yep. Especially the one in Costa Mesa, California, with the OG, where Chuck Smith was the pastor and stuff. Yeah, they had like every Saturday night they had a free like rock show, and like a bunch of bands that I grew up listening to would play there. And like we actually we lived in Southern California for like a year and a half when I was a kid, and we went to that church, and then we moved back to the island. But yeah, and so that culture was like a huge part of my life, my identity. Like my music kind of came up in that culture of that church, and there was a venue at the church, and like all these bands that like from that era like came out of that scene that even went on to, that are still, I mean, even Pedro the Lion is technically came out of that scene, and like, all these bands that like, MXPX and like all this stuff. And, it was the whole thing, my whole identity. And then when I started producing, full time, it was in that space. It was in that sphere of like the, we're Christians, but we're cool, and we we happen to be Christians in a rock band. We're not a Christian rock band. Like, and I'm
Casey, you were one of those, right?
Sort of mocking that right now, but it was real. Like that was like a real thing that was really important to us back then. And you caught me at a good time in my life, because about 2 years ago, if I would have been on this podcast, I would have just been super resentful and super pissy about everything. But I'm starting to have compassion for my past now. So
yeah, it's funny how that happens.
Stage. That's where we're all settling in, I think.
Right.
Yeah, you're like, I recognize how and why things were the way they were. I can look back and have a little bit of compassion for that 17-year-old me that just thought he was on top of the world when he was convincing people they needed to repent and become Christians because they were on a path to hell. And he was like, ooh, I remember you. I know right now if I talked to that guy, I would not like him. So
oh my God, yes. I mean, the biggest hurdle for me for my own past is I literally almost can't even. It's the cringiest thing in the world. But I was like, there was a moment where I was really into creation science and debating people about it.
We had
oh my God, dude. Holy shit.
Good company
like,
here, man.
Oh my God. Like the shit that came out of my mouth, if I heard that now, I would be like, do you hear what you're saying right now?
Hey, you using college credit for it.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my God, that's amazing.
A lot of hang-ups on not knowing how carbon-14 dating works. It's pretty
funny. Yeah. Well, it was inaccurate. You could carbon date a live seal and it would tell you it was like thousands of years old.
That's what I read.
Yep. I
Dude,
still remember all the points too. I remember all of them.
It's funny, like we were at Target in Wichita the other day, and it was kind of late. It was like getting close to closing, so it was like 9:30, and we're walking through like the sporting goods section, and this rubber ball just flies past us and smashes into a shelf and knocks a whole bunch of stuff off. And I was just like struck by this feeling, like it is just the continual thing where you hear people as they get older just lamenting the fact that kids these days are not like them, and they don't, this ball hits the shelf, and I was just thinking, like, teenagers are the same.
Yeah,
they're the exact same. Like they're still making the same jokes that we were like 20 years ago.
I know.
I have a 14-year-old.
What if I got a bike and I rolled it?
Yeah. I have a 14-year-old, and he'll like tell me something funny that he thinks is funny, and I'll be like, "You realize that people have been saying that exact same thing since literally before I was born." And he was like, "What? You always think everything's new when you're a kid."
I know.
Fart jokes.
Yeah.
I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and my 6-year-old she's in kindergarten now, and she's coming home saying stuff, and I'm like, what dopey kid in school said that now you're repeating? Like, I know that kid watched the cartoon and heard that. Totally. And that joke was the same thing that was like that was the joke that was in all the cartoons we watched. I'm like, oh man, they're still reusing these jokes. I feel like writing cartoons possibly might not be, I mean, if you're not going for gold, right?
Yeah.
There's some good quality kids television out there. I can attest to that as a parent. There are ones that I will watch with my kids and ones that I will not. But
yeah, there's ones that I will watch by myself.
Yeah. Shout out to Bluey. I'm going to shout out to Bluey right now for anyone who's listening with kids who are in kindergarten. But it's so crazy when you watch your kids watch TV and the things they laugh at, and you're just like, that's the same shit that I thought. I remember thinking that was so funny, like calling someone an idiot or telling someone to shut up. You're just like, it's still universal.
Funny. Yeah,
dude. I had this thought the other day. I actually like wrote it down to talk about in like an intro, but to derail everything. What was like your go-to?
Sorry.
No.
What was like your go-to favorite joke when you were like elementary school? Do you remember?
Oh my God. I mean, gosh. Well, first of all, that was a really long time ago. But second of all, I mean, my grandpa was like in the restaurant business. And my dad told me, this was something I love to tell friends, but my dad told me that when he was young and like a server, or like, I think he was an adult, but he was a server. He would go around to tables, and if there was a kid at the table, he would say, "Eat every potato and pee on your plate."
My great grandpa would say that.
Yeah.
I want you to eat every bean and pee on your plate, and I would just giggle forever.
That's
Sam, you got one?
I don't. There's not anything specific. I know I would just repeat things that I heard. I wanted to be so bad. I was like desperately wanted to be the funny kid. I was homeschooled, home churched. Like,
right.
I wasn't getting out.
Oh yeah, I knew that. So. I've listened to your podcast before, actually.
Okay,
I remember.
Nice.
Man, I'm glowing.
Thank you. So I'm like, I was the epitome of shelter. Like in my friends group, I thought I was pretty fucking funny. And then, you get to church and you're like, oh my God, these kids are hilarious. And there was like the kids who would dress funny and be, oh my God. It was like, that was the worst wake up call I ever had, because I just felt sad for probably 2 years that I just couldn't cut it.
I felt the same way. And I remember like being like, wait, what is street smarts? I've never even heard of that. There's no possible way that I have it if I don't even know what it is.
There was this movie from that I saw when I was a kid, but it was an older movie called The Court. I think it was called The Court Jester. It's called The Court Jester, and it was like I don't know. It was just like this quirky
horror movie.
No, it was like a quirky comedy, and I It probably doesn't hold up. I don't know that if I watched it today, I'd be like, that was good. But
Yeah.
there were like lines from there that I remember like reusing all the time. And I knew it was like old because you watched old stuff because it was wholesome. And
Yeah, right.
And I just remember repeating jokes from that. I don't even remember specifically what they were, but you know that feeling you get when you're like, I'm going to sell this as my own, but I know I'm ripping
Oh,
it.
yeah. Wait until this lands. I'm going to be holding court.
It's like our olden days version of like Meme Thief, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Katie, I have a feeling that I have a feeling whatever your joke was is something you're still using. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I think this could still play. So there was this guy trying to hire somebody for his company, right? So he puts out a wanted ad and he's just looking for help. And he's
a real joke you got here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, no, this is the follow along. So
I'm here for it.
Open interviews, and sure enough, first guy walks into his office is a pirate, and he's like, well, okay, I don't know how this is going to work. So nice to meet you. Thank you for your interest in our position. Before we get started, I got to ask you a couple of questions. I got to know, like, what happened to your leg? You got a peg leg. What happened to it? And he's like, I was a deckhand on a Spanish galleon, and a cannonball took off my knee. Wow, really? Okay, all right, that makes sense. He goes, what happened to your hand? How'd you get the hook? And he's like, we were sacking a city in the Bikini Atolls, and I got into a sword fight with a soldier, and he cut my hand off. He's like, jeez, okay, all right, I can see how that might happen. He goes, last question before we get into the interview. How'd you get what happened to your eye? How'd you get the patch? And he's like, I was standing on the deck and the sun was in me eyes. I looked up and a seagull took a dump right in me eye. And he's like, oh, God, okay. Seagull poop causes blindness? And he's like, it does if it's your first day with a hook. Dude,
I don't know.
That joke killed in first grade.
Yeah. You might have upped the ante and said crap instead of poop, and really.
Yeah, really got the shock value in. You were kind of a nerdy kid.
Yeah, I think by anyone's standards, I was.
Yeah. I'm picking up on that.
Christian school.
Yeah,
went to church with the same people, so I knew a whole like 30 people. Growing up through high school. So I don't know that you come out of that without being a nerdy kid.
No, I love it. I mean, nerdy kids are my people, so it wasn't a diss.
Yeah. All right, back to you, Aaron. I feel like we're just getting all over the place.
No, I love it. Chaos is my friend.
Good.
So another, something I was thinking about actually that was prompted by our rabbit hole that we just went down was, I had a weird kind of thing. Like when I talk to people and tell them I was a pastor's kid, they're like, oh yeah. And then I'm like, well, it was a little different because it was this like really music focused church. And they really like, it was really important for them to be like kind of cool and relevant. And, which is, something we can all relate to as far as the landscape today as well. But,
oh yeah,
but looking back, I realized how not cool and relevant a lot of the stuff they thought was, but there was a lot that was too. But so, I dressed really crazy and I got my ear pierced in like 7th grade or 6th grade or something, and got called, fag every day and stuff. And like, by people in my school. But
yeah, that word used to get thrown around like all the time.
That was
even when I was young. I think you got probably a few years on us. But I feel like up until high school was the first time it was like, we don't say that anymore.
Yeah, no,
that word stings. It always stung.
Yeah, and I was kind of gothy and like, I had this like very developed sense of personal expression, and it was encouraged by my parents. My parents thought it was great. My parents didn't care if I got good grades. They wanted, they just wanted me to like really like, express myself and find my own path. So, but on on the other side of it though, like I'm not joking, like I'm not being like I'm not exaggerating. I didn't cuss until I was probably in over 18. I never said one cuss word. I didn't have alcohol until my 21st birthday. I
I can
didn't
share that
smoke.
experience.
I didn't, and I was like, and I realized after I graduated that, you know, a lot of my close friends were not believers in school, and you know, they were all kind of sheltering me from this, like, the party lifestyle that they were living in. Like, they wouldn't invite me, but they also wouldn't talk about it around me. So like, I remember finding out, like, when I was 19, that like all of my friends would get drunk on the weekends and go to parties and do all the stuff you see in movies, and I'd be like, really? I didn't even know that was even happening. Like, I was
so interesting,
completely oblivious to it. Like, and I wasn't like not drinking because like, oh, it would be bad if I did. I'm sure that had something to do with it, but it just wasn't even on my radar. Like, it wasn't even like it wasn't like I was like resisting temptation. It wasn't there. And
it wasn't there to tempt you.
yeah. So, you know, I mean, but I've struggled with intense anxiety about, like, you know, heaven and hell and the rapture and, you know, afterlife stuff since I was like really young, like, to where I've gone through years of my life where I couldn't really sleep because of it and stuff like that.
So you got at least a few of the cool parts of church life.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, I mean, the Calvary Chapel doctrine, they always said it was like a non-denominational church, but they had a very, very specific doctrine that, you know, of course they were like, if you don't believe this, then you might not be in the book of life or whatever. But you know, it was very, you know, tribulation focused, rapture focused.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, we were like a pre-trib or post-trib, you know, belief, and like, or no, pre-trib. It was pre-trib. Sorry,
and pre-trib is like
there's a rapture and then the tribulation happens. Yes,
then
that's what they believed, and you know, like,
hard to
very
keep them all straight.
Yeah, I know it's
pre-trib,
really
post-trib. This is the millennial, the amillennial, the post-millennial.
Yeah,
I mean, hit the deep cuts, man.
Yeah, and you know, under the guise of like, you know, we're so cool, and we're like, you know, all about love, and you know, there's nothing you can do to earn your salvation, and you know, this real anti-legalism kind of message that came from the church. There was still the fundamental, like, building blocks of the entire faith was, except unless you say or do or think or believe or whatever this very specific thing about someone that lived 2,000 years ago, you are going to be perpetually and consciously tormented for eternity. So like, that is like
high stakes
really
game.
Really can fuck with a little kid's head. I mean like, because it didn't scan. I can look back now with hindsight and be like, okay, I believe this is what I believe. But then there was something deep in me that was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, the dissonance between these two things you're saying is so huge. And then that kind of like sets the whole focus on this thing that may or may not possibly happen at some point later on in the future is actually the most important thing. And how you feel or what you have or your needs that are met now today, especially fleshly needs, are really irrelevant. Because like, this time's going to go by in a blink, and then it's going to be eternity, and you're going to be in one place or the other, and there's no do-overs. And so it's just the most terrifying fucking thing you can tell a little kid ever. Like, it blows my mind now to think about that, and I'm so glad that my two boys are not dealing with that. My oldest still has a little bit of trauma from it because he remembers. He's you know, he's in his late 20s now. Actually, he's going to be 27 next month. But but yeah, so yeah, I kind of just went off there. But I'm trying to give you a picture of sort of the, like, it's there. The stuff that's important was the same, but there was some kind of weird differences. Like, when I meet people out here, and since I moved to Tennessee, like, totally different cultures in the church, even though that same kind of message was there too. But
Yeah, it's weird too the way that people internalize messages differently. I mean, a lot of denominations can focus differently on different things.
For sure.
I think I feel like some of the more charismatic movements definitely were pretty end times focused. Not that I wasn't, we were pretty reserved, but it was a lot of, I mean, the conversation was there a lot. It's weird too, having, I started my shift out of that evangelical world before I had kids, but
right.
I don't think it hit me how fucked up some of it was until like my kids were the age where they were starting to hear it, because
sure,
my family, like all of my families, minus some siblings, like, but there are enough people in my family who are still very much a part of it that I haven't had conversations I should probably have about what I want them to say to my kids and don't, because I know that's going to open a can of worms.
Man. That is tough.
Awful. Yeah, because it's like when you go, I really don't want you to talk to my kids about Christ's death and how it's their fault. They go, really? What? You're not a Christian anymore. Granted, they already think I really just, I don't know. Things are interesting now that
they're praying for your soul. Let's be blunt about it.
He did this for you. He did this for you because you're bad.
You were born such a piece of shit that he had to do this.
It's like a dog that shits on the carpet and you rub their face in it. Like, you did this. Yep. Look what you did.
Yep. But I love you.
Yeah. But he loves it. So, and you can't
spreading the truth
connect the message. And I know some of it has a lot to do with people who found that message when they were older. It's like, look, if you're 25 and you want to decide that it's wonderful that Christ died for your sins and had to, in order for you to be eternally sealed in heaven, which is just sounds bizarre when you say it, when you don't think it's true anymore. But it's when you that's fine. Like, you could tell me that and be like, cool. Yeah, that's not for me, but great. But when you think of what that does to kids, because that's what it is. Like I mentioned, like our parents find this stuff, like their salvation experiences in their early 20s. And like, I believe that it's true and it changed my life. And I feel like it gave me some structure, and they have a million reasons for why they believe what they believe now. And whether you agree with them or not is a totally separate conversation. But when you bring in kids, it's like, you didn't have this message drilled into you as a 6-year-old. You don't have name a kid who grew up this way that doesn't remember saying their salvation prayer because they were talked to about hell and where they were going to go when they die. And it's not a lot. It's like, it's not a message for kids, and it doesn't do well. And of course the idea of it being true is what makes it perpetuate. They're like, oh, well, it's true. And if this is true, then I have no choice. Like, what, you don't want your 6-year-old to burn in hell for all the time.
Oh my God. That is such a good point. And that was something that got more and more illuminated to me over the years, that I had to compartmentalize, because over here, I was like, I believe that this is true. Right. But over here, I'm like, but I don't, I kind of don't even care about it. Like, it doesn't resonate with me. There's nothing in me that's like, oh, I just want to go to church and put my hands up in the air. Unless I was feeling really bad about myself or something I did, then it was like cathartic to do that. But that huge dissonance. And for me, like, it really like spawned this like scenario where like duality just became the only way to survive. Like, and the more that grew, I was like, the more that like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde became so much different from each other. And then I was like feeling like I was doing this like weird dance of like, wait, who am I today? Oh, I'm doing children's worship, but I'm really hungover right now. And I think they can probably smell it on me. And like, I definitely smell like cigarettes because I had one this morning or whatever. So like that was like really damaging to me, because I didn't feel like I could be honest about any of that stuff. Because it was so like, we actually don't even want to know about that stuff. We just definitely don't want to see it. And, anyway, I'm kind of rambling again, but like that, that dissonance and that thing of believing it, like, but not, is really, really weird and hard to wrap your head around.
I think that's that's what's hard to really like express, because the weight of like knowing that because of you, God's perfect son had to die so that, to make a way for you to be free of your awful self because you're only bad. Like anything that's born of you that you did on your own is bad.
Yeah.
And you're only good through Christ. I think when you
your
take
body
that,
is bad, your thoughts are bad, sex is bad, everything's bad.
well, yeah, and like where you really start to understand like the ramifications of that mindset is when you pair it with the idea of like testimony. Like everything that you do has the potential to lead someone out of God's hand and into hell. Like, is it really a big deal to smoke? It's not that big deal of a deal to smoke, but you're just like the rest of the world, and maybe so and so who would have looked at you and seen that you were different, and would have like decided like, I want to be like him. I want to find out more. I need to ask some questions. I'm going to go to church with him. Maybe he won't ever do that because you smoked a cigarette just like everybody else. You're just like the world.
Yeah. How entitled is that too? I mean, that's crazy to think like that I'm so important, like that I could like, accidentally say, God damn it. And like someone's going to be tortured forever because of that. Like
I'd say fuck well before God damn it too.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful.
Oh yeah.
The GDs.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Focus on the Family. They when they do their movie reviews, they tell you exactly how many GD combos are in movies, because that's the worst.
And I appreciate whoever like sacrificed their own innocence to make that review.
All those,
to keep a tally sheet. Do you think that they had like an Excel file like up and ready to go where they could just like tally them up?
They had to sit in the back seat with a dimmer all the way down on their laptop. They're like, this is
and for sure,
work.
like after a point, like the person probably just was like, "There's 50. No one on the site's gonna watch it. They're not gonna count them. It's fine."
Actually, there was 4 instances of nudity. Yeah. I vividly remember.
They're not even going to the movies. They're just like purchasing the scripts online for $15 so they can
read.
Right? Yeah.
I read the script to Spy Kids 2.
Yeah. I mean, I just did find word in on the PDF of the script of Spy Kids 2. But yes.
Dude, life hack.
Yeah.
Afterlife hack. It is funny, and it's like you think about how many different parts of your life that mindset was used to like control. Think about the stupidest, most frivolous things, and it sounds like it wasn't as big of a deal in like in yours, but like for us, clothing held like this super significant place in like who we were and stuff, especially for girls. Because like if you were a girl when I was younger and you shopped at Abercrombie, like even if you were buying long, loose-fitting polos, like you're kind of flirting with disaster.
You're kind of a slut, basically.
Yeah. Like, do you really want to be associated with that?
Yeah,
they have nipples in their catalog. Is that what you are? Is that what represents you?
Yeah.
Well, and too, like that the culture of like, it's basically women's responsibility to make sure men don't stumble, was definitely part of what I grew up into.
I mean, that's a part that I still buy.
Yeah. No, like that is like so fucked up. I mean, it's like insane. It's like, it's so insulting to both of the genders involved in that scenario. Like, okay, this caveman over here isn't responsible for his thoughts and actions, so you got to cover up, so that he doesn't like. It's crazy.
It's so
to me.
wild.
It's crazy.
Especially like because you can think back to being a kid and you're like, look, you were just horny anyway. It didn't like. I don't know if anyone watches the show Big Mouth, but
I love that show.
It just captures like adolescence in the most incredible way.
Yeah,
especially this most recent season, and it's weird to look at because you're like, this is such it is so weird to watch a show built around kids in middle school with all of this, and then you're like, that is pretty accurate.
Yeah,
like It's
hard.
extreme in some ways,
you-
but you're like, middle school is more rated R than any part of my life now,
oh yeah,
including the part
absolutely.
that smokes weed and drinks too much. Like that's like
Sex Education is another really good show. I don't know if you've watched that, but it's a
I haven't.
Netflix show.
I don't think I've heard of that.
So good.
I've heard it's great. I haven't watched it.
It is so good, and it's Gillian Anderson, who is like, probably my number one life crush.
Is that
on
the
planet Earth. It's
X-Files?
Scully from the X-Files.
Yeah. She
Yeah.
also, not to get too in the weeds, she did she did a serial killer show on Netflix
Yeah.
that was dope.
Yeah.
The Killing or
called-
something? No, not Killing.
It's called. Damn it! I watched it and I can't remember what it's called.
I
It's
know.
really good. Yeah, it's like British. She does a really good British accent because she lived in England, often like back and forth of England and the U.S. growing up. So she
Okay.
they do both accents perfectly. And I am a Gillian Anderson nerd, so that's why I just said that.
Oh my god. Okay, Aaron, I want to jump back to your story a bit because we're never gonna touch on most of it at this point, but that's fine because we're having a good time.
Can I ask a question real quick before we
Shut
before we
up,
move
Casey.
forward?
I'm trying to.
I'm sorry. I was just curious. Like, I mean, to be in Seattle, like the hub for the grunge movement or whatever you want to call it, did you participate in that? Was there any like really significant moments for you in there, related to that whole thing? Or
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, the energy definitely trickled down into the whole music scene. Everything was just kind of alive. Everything seemed possible. These bands that, I mean, I remember like when I saw Nirvana on MTV for the first time, I called my girlfriend at the time and it was like, you'll never believe what's happening right now. Like, these bands that we loved and were like our local bands were starting to pop off and like, just, it was crazy. And then, I saw Chris Novoselic on the street, the bass player for Nirvana, and like talked to him, like, just weird shit like that was like, it was real, it was happening. And but we kind of we were also trying to distance ourselves from it a little bit too, because we didn't want to like feel like we were trying to ride the coattails of like anyone else, or not that we did, but anyone else, or like like that we were trying to be like, just associate something and jump on the bandwagon or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was definitely interesting. And like almost everything in your life, like if only I could have appreciated it then the way I would now, knowing, but yeah, it was crazy.
It's that grunge music is something that it didn't hit me. I came in, I mean, I'm 33, so
Right.
it hit me. I came in obviously to it late. It's been played on the radio my entire life for the most part. Even it's funny, like hearing you say like, oh, the first time they were on MTV, that Nirvana was on MTV. It's like, for me, after you start getting into music, getting into your own kind of music and not just listening to the radio, watching MTV.
Right.
Like MTV was like the video equivalent of radio at that point.
Right.
For me, like they would, you'd have the occasional, like, I feel like they would play sometimes like heavy music at night at a certain time or something like that. I forget.
Yeah.
Headbangers Ball.
Yes,
Headbangers Ball, yeah.
Ball, that's right. And we used to be like, that felt like, that's probably a similar feeling to me as what you're trying to describe with like
Totally.
when Nirvana was on. You're like, I wasn't even in bands like Slipknot. They weren't for me, but when I would see Slipknot on MTV at 11:30 at night, I was like, fuck yeah. This is important to me.
Like look around,
So-
make sure no one's around. Yes.
So I feel like that's like the only way I can relate to the experience you're describing. But
Mhm.
what I didn't, even though I never cared about it, like it took me until later for me to realize that how incredibly influential that scene was, and
Yeah.
what that did to music, for musicians. I mean,
It
there was
changed
probably
everything,
a
man.
band I listened to that wasn't like, if it wasn't for Nirvana, I
Yep.
don't know if I would have ever even.
Absolutely. It's
I
crazy.
can't do grunge. My dad stopped before grunge. He somewhere between like 80s like radio rock and grunge.
Right.
He switched to like gaither vocal bands, so we really missed out on that era.
Yeah,
Mm-mm-mm.
not the greatest of choices, but
Mm.
No,
All
but
right.
here we are.
No comment.
so all All right, Aaron, you moved to Seattle. You know, how like it's obvious that you've been in, like you mentioned, being in the arts, being around music, and
Right.
that being an influence in your life. Like, how the heck did you get into production and find your way into like Tooth and Nail? Because I'm guessing you got in early on before that was something that people would have been like, oh my God, about.
Yeah, so I have always been kind of nerdy, and I kind of figured out with the resources I had right around 7th grade, I started recording music. And yeah, with like really like hilarious, like just Frankenstein setup, like, and and then, but it was something like, I've said this before, but it's just, I can't not say it, but it was something I couldn't not do. Like, I was absolutely driven, and it was the only thing like on my mind. It was what excited me, and it was I was good at it. It was easy for me. And but in the process, the whole point, the whole reason I learned how to record music and even play guitar or sing or whatever was just to have the final product of the song. Like, they were all the means to the end of having this magical recorded thing that was like, could maybe make me feel the same way that other music made me feel, And so by the time I was like 18, I had started recording. There was actually a studio in the church that was like really legit. It wasn't technically part of the church. The guy rented it from the church, but we became friends, and he was kind of a mentor. And I had already started recording bands. Like the summer after I graduated from high school, I started recording bands in there, friends' bands. There was so much music happening, so it's really a perfect storm, kind of things I was born with and luck, and then my band, I had a band in the 90s called Poor Old Lou, and we got signed when I was like 19 or something, to a label in California, like a Christian, like alternative Christian label, which is how I met Brandon Ebel. He worked there,
Okay.
fresh out of college, basically.
For people who don't know, Brandon Ebel is the Tooth and Nail.
Yeah, he's the founder and owner of Tooth and Nail Records, and he was instrumental in getting my band signed. He was a fan. He was originally from the Portland area, and would play us our indie releases on his college radio station and stuff. So it was this kind of perfect storm. And then I pretty quickly realized that like people were actually paying me to record their songs, and like being in a band was like we were losing money. I mean, it was like it was definitely like a negative for sure. And then I remember like right after Brandon and I had hung out in California, my band was down doing something, a video shoot or something. And he told me about Tooth and Nail. Like, he said he was starting a label. This is what it's called. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I really respected him. He just had this sort of energy to him that was like infectious. And then my band was playing a show in Bremerton. The headliner canceled. The MXPX guys were there. They came up to me. I kind of knew them. They came up to me and said, can we play? And I went and asked the promoter, and they said, sure. And so they played, and I was like, holy shit, this is insane. And so I told them that night, I was like, I have the studio that I'm working at. I will record you for free. I'll do like 3 or 4 songs for free. And the only thing I ask in exchange is if I can give the recordings to my friend Brandon, who's starting this label. And that was what happened. Like, that was sort of the moment of what happened. And so he signed MXPX and hired me to do the record. I was 19 when I produced their first album. And then I started doing other records for him. And then like we kind of like separated after that kind of like crazy moment, like around 93, 94. And I started just pouring myself into the local music scene and just recording tons of bands locally. I never past like high school, I didn't like Christian music. I always was trying so hard to find Christian bands that I liked. And there was a few for sure. I'm not like trying to broad brush my past and make it look how I wish it looked. But
Yeah. It's like, well, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to go ahead and throw my sentiments up there.
please.
There was a feeling for me of it being, a lot of it felt forced. Like, oh my God. Like I was one of the biggest.
You're nicer than I
kids.
am.
Yeah. Like I was full blown Christian. I wanted to witness to my friends all the time, and I couldn't do Christian music. I couldn't do, your kind of your praise and worshipy stuff. Not even that, but like the ones that tried to bridge on rock. Like, one of the bands that comes up a good bit is like your DC Talks or your
right.
whatever. And I'm like, even then I was like, this feels too Christian for me. It never worked for me. And I don't know if is that a feeling you felt as well?
Yeah, it wasn't authentic. And I just didn't get that juice that I got from The Cure or the bands I was into at the time. Like there was just something about it. Like that it was just empty. It was hollow. And I don't know if I don't know if they had these when you guys were in youth group, but like they had these really funny, like the labels, or maybe the Christian bookstores would had magazines, and like they would have like targeted towards youth pastors, and they would have like whole sections where it'd be like, if your church kids are fans of this band, then they'll like this band.
Oh yeah.
And they were always like the most preposterous like comparisons, like so hilarious. And it was like, why can't they be fans of that band? Like why do they need an alternate, like it? That always perplexed me, because I didn't feel like music was gonna like change my faith, and it didn't. It never did. I mean, my faith changed, but it didn't have anything to do with music. And yeah, so the Christian music scene never resonated with me, and that's why Tooth and Nail was such a refuge. It was like this hope, this beacon of hope, and yeah, it was like, it felt like the most authentic that I'd ever heard. And it probably was because a lot of the guys making that music weren't Christians. but eventually even that changed. Eventually that, in order to play the game, you got to follow the rules, and if you get big enough, you're gonna end up following the rules. And there was some of those rules that ended up getting kind of locked in. And I remember when I was doing that, when I came back to start working with Brandon on a more official basis in 2001, which that's when I had my like almost 12-year run of just insanity with like just awesome record after awesome record that I got to work on.
You really did, man. It's incredible when I look at, it's like the bands that you worked. That's why I said at the beginning, like, I don't think, because I was when I was in high school, like that was a lot of them. That was Emery, that was Anne Boleyn, that was Project 86, that was like, you were on all of that.
I was.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy.
I was on a different spectrum, I guess, than you guys. Like Christian rock was the edgy thing that I got to do.
Yeah.
Like it was music was always like viewed with suspicion by like,
for sure,
fundamentalists in the circle I was. And it had like, they viewed it with almost like having these hypnotic qualities. Mm-hmm. So it was always to be viewed as like a potential gateway for like bad thoughts or negativity, or some of the nuts would be like,
like a Ouija board, basically.
It's like a Ouija board. It's like that. Yes. And so like, I knew, like, I remember in like 4th or 5th grade, I got a DC Talk. I got, Jesus Freaks.
Yep.
And I remember like listening to Jesus Freaks.
Multiple Jesus Freaks.
Wow, you need to nitpick me. I'm the DC Talk fan here.
I'm stepping on your misstep. That's cool.
But I remember listening to that and being like, wow, this is like it. This is what I've been like trying to find, is like something like that. Like I want something like this. Yeah. And I think like for me and my buddies, we were all kind of in that boat, and Christian rock was like this outlet for us to be like, man, this is something where we can like almost relate to normal kids.
Right. Yeah.
And there was a lot of pushback in my church about that kind of stuff. It was always like, I don't know if you guys should be listening to this. Like, this is really on edge. And once in a while, like, your mom would pull out the backing in the CD and like read the lyrics. And like, I remember my mom, I borrowed an Evanescence album from my buddy Jesse. It's the one with her on the front
over
cover.
the line. Over the line.
Exactly. It's the one where she's on the front cover and she's really pale and she has black hair. And my mom like read a bunch of the lyrics and got really mad.
Yeah,
and
she was demon possessed on that cover, obviously.
Yeah, like I remember her not knowing what a tourniquet was, and she thought it was like a garrote, like the thing that you choke like somebody chokes you with. She thought a tourniquet was like a way of killing somebody or killing yourself.
She thought you were getting into autoerotic asphyxiation.
Yeah, exactly. And like I had to give the album back to him, and I couldn't keep. I burned it, and I had to throw it away. Just Christian rock was like a way for us to kind of like get out from under our church a little bit, and like man, did you get the new Pillar album? Oh my god,
yeah.
So
well,
good.
You know what though is I really think, and this is a complete speculation, but I think you were the primary demographic of all that whole scene. I mean, because I
think so.
I didn't grow up that way, but I knew thousands of people that did, and I talked to people, and I could see it in their eyes that they were like, oh, thank you, literally praise Jesus that you made music that I can actually stomach, and I'm not embarrassed if my friends hear it in the background. And that it's so weird to think about now, but I mean, yeah,
they were necessary. They were so necessary.
That's why the Christian music industry exists, is because of that sentiment. Like that,
the only outlet.
Yeah, like this is like our thing that we get. I mean, and then you get, then it grows even more from tribalism and kind of all that stuff, which is, I mean, that's a whole thing in and of itself. But
then you have to protect it. Then you have to be a staunch defender of those bands.
Yep, and they become your identity, and like everything every word and action they do, you're hanging on that.
I was looking at your Wikipedia page, and you worked with Demon Hunter a little bit, right?
A ton, yeah.
So I think it was like one of their early albums. I got X 2003, if you remember that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like sampler CD, and it had a song on it. I can't remember what it was called, but I remember like getting X 2003, and I'm like listening to it, and it's the most ridiculous mix of bands. It's like everything
were hilarious. Dude.
There was nothing on there that was related to any other song on the album.
Mm-mm.
And then all of a sudden, like you get through like Caedmon's Call or whatever, and there's this Demon Hunter song, and I remember like hearing it and being like, I think this is a little too much for me.
I don't think Jesus likes this at all.
This is the Frank Peretti of Christian rock.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But that was like, Tooth and Nail's business model was to be the Frank Peretti of music, of Christian rock. I mean, it was like, and I'm not saying that to diss. I love Tooth and Nail, and I will never not. But it was like, how far can we push this? And that those edges would expand every year a little bit too, as the scene changed and people changed and all that. Yeah,
Tooth and Nail was the lifeblood for people. I mean, I know you said that a lot of people weren't even Christians as they were on it. I think that's super interesting. People, honestly, you probably get most of that. You can probably get a lot of that information on the Labeled podcast, where they dive into pretty much every.
For sure, yeah.
Band. So anyone who's listening, if whatever band you loved on Tooth and Nail, there's probably an episode on the Labeled podcast about it where you'll get a deep dive. It's definitely worth checking out. But I don't know what I would have done without it. That's how I got introduced to heavy music. That's, or the gateway bands into heavy music. And then you find your Solid States, and then you're like, and through that is when I kind of realized there were bands outside. Like, I always knew there were those heavy bands, but you can't gamble on listening and maybe getting into something you should. I don't know. Whatever. There's all these reasons that you can't. And it's like, you start with the ones on Solid State, and honestly, I mean, let's be real, Solid State fucking swept the metalcore scene. Like they changed the game for that.
Tooth and Nail changed all of music.
They did.
They really did. Like
it's incredible what they did.
I mean, I don't like when I
you did, Aaron.
Well,
you're part of that.
when I meet people now, especially like because emo's so cool again right now. Like if I meet people and I'm like, that are not in the Christian music industry, aren't Christians, never listen to it, and I mention Tooth and Nail, they're like, "Oh, seriously, that's badass." Like Tooth and Nail is very respected now. There were times at the beginning where it was kind of poo-pooed by like snobby, anti-religious people or whatever.
Yeah.
But now it's like just especially in the metal world. I mean, a lot of the bands on Solid State are like considered to be some of the best current metal bands in the world. Like
how many
they go to like Norway and tour or whatever. Like seriously, like it's crazy. Yeah.
Like how many bands came out trying to sound exactly like August Burns Red after they hit the scene? I mean, to me, they're one of the most like big deal. When I was, every local band was like an August Burns Red ripoff when I was in high school and college. It was like,
I mean, look
Thrill
at Under
Seeker
Oath.
was like, that was my identity for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, one of the things I want to get into is obviously you've spent so much time in the Christian music industry. There's so much that goes on. Maybe people are talking about on the back end, how they feel. Maybe one of the things that, we learned growing up is that you have to find safe people to talk to about your questions. But
for sure,
I don't know what it looked like on, when you mix a faith-based idea with music and you're doing it as a business. So like, I guess one of the things that I'm curious about is like, over a long period of time, you definitely are indicating that you've had faith shifts and that bands that you worked with maybe by their second, third album weren't Christians, or maybe even their first. Like, was that stuff that was talked about in it, like during the time that you were working with all these bands? And then like, when did you get to a point where you were like, when did your faith start shifting? And then when did you admit that your faith started shifting, or wherever it is now? Maybe you started losing it. Maybe it started shifting. I really would like to hear that.
Yeah, those are both really great questions. The landscape of like the music industry, at least from my perspective of being in the studio, I was in the studio with bands. So they'd come in, usually off a tour, we'd record, they'd be getting ready for some tour. So like they were sort of like a revolving door of like, stories from the road and life and all that stuff. And that space being a safe space to be like real or talk about it evolved over time. It started as gossip. It was like, did you hear that this guy, or dude, that guy's not even, he's not even a Christian. He's in the band. Like, and like they know it and they still let him be, and then it evolved into, people just outwardly telling me while I was working with them, yeah, I'm not a Christian anymore, or I never was, or whatever. And it became, I think for some people almost a badge of honor to be like, yeah, I don't even care about, I love this band, I love the music, I actually really like the label, I like the shows, but the whole Christian part of it just was never my bag, or it's not anymore. Or but I definitely saw people that like that literally had to pretend they were until some point. They had to pretend they believed it, or at least not say they didn't. They had to basically nod their head and go along with everything.
You know that. I mean, I remember hearing that, like the rumors of the bands. I think one of the key ones was like, "Oh, Sleeper." It's like people in "Oh, Sleeper" aren't. It's like,
yeah, and He Is Legend.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the lead singer from He Is Legend kissed the guy from first to last on stage.
Yeah.
So the stuff you get hung up on. Anyway, I cut you off.
I get hung up on. Just dipping into the memory banks. I hope you kissed him. I like it.
Yeah, I back it. Yeah, and then for me, I had this deeply ingrained conditioning that I was afraid to look at what was, like what is. Like I was afraid to just literally observe current state of reality. I had a fear around that. for a long time. I mean, so much so that, I think it was the catalyst for me, having a lot of self-destructive behavior around alcohol and stuff like that. And I remember this is really funny, but I was my ex-wife and I, we were going, or she was my wife at the time. We were going to this church here in Tennessee after I moved here, called Journey, and it was like, I felt like it was just so cool, and everybody was so real, and it was just awesome. And I do really have a lot of good memories from that community. But I met this guy who I just love. He's just the coolest dude, and he literally, we were just having coffee one day, and he's like, "So what podcasts do you like?" And I was like, "I don't listen to podcasts. Like, I've never listened to any." And this was only like 8 years ago or something like that. So the podcasts were not new. Like, I just hadn't got on the bandwagon. And he told me about a couple, and one of them was actually a church's podcast from California, but they were like real edgy. Like, they were talking about stuff that I was like, is this okay to talk about? And then
People should have health care and whatnot.
Yeah, well, yeah, but also like, just like the annihilation theory of hell, just stuff like that, like,
Yep.
different things. And then he also was like, "Oh, you got to listen to the Robcast too." And I was like, "Oh, well, in my head, I'm like, but he's the guy that wrote that book that shall not be named." And like, I remember so I got really into both of those, and I started to basically soften up to the idea of I remember I literally had this moment where I felt like God told me that I had permission to question him. Like that it there was nothing I could question that would change any truth or reality or certainty or anything like that, right? So go ahead and question me all you want. In fact, you probably need to, because you don't really believe any of this stuff. This isn't really something that you have real conviction about. So why don't you just really explore what do you believe? And I remember I got so into the Robcast, and I had sailed through, I'd sailed through not hearing anything too, heretical on the podcast. And I was like, man, I really like this guy. He's just got such a great vibe and energy, and I love everything he's saying. And I had started leaning kind of left politically quite a while before that. I never really got into politics that much, but I always resonated more with the left anyway. And then one day I was like, I really want to read Love Wins, but I know that if I read it, I won't be able to listen to his podcast anymore, because I know I'm gonna disagree with with the book. I know that the book is wrong, because that's what I've been told. And I read it, and I felt like 1,000 pounds of weight lift off of my body when I read that book. I just was like I had I had a more intense spiritual experience from reading that book than any time I ever had in church or in a worship service or doing my 20th altar call or whatever. I really did have this enlightenment. And it's funny now, because I see Rob Bell's theology as fairly conservative, based on what I even believe now. So I mean, I love him still. I think he's amazing. I actually went and saw him live a couple years ago, but yeah, so that's when it started. That was about, I want to say, maybe 5 years ago, four or 5 years ago. So it's been really recent for me.
Yeah.
And it's escalated quickly. But
it does. Well, I mean, once the cards start falling, that's what's crazy about it.
Yep.
It's because I have a very similar experience. I read that book not too long after it came out, and I had started listening to his podcast as well, and that was a big help for me. I just remember when I read, I don't know where I was at when I read it, but I remember being like, yeah, you read it and you're like, oh yeah, this all tracks, and it's not wild. It's not what we were told it was. That's for goddamn sure. It's not like a book of, it's like a book of, but that's what they hated. What they hated about Rob Bell was this is a book of questions. And then I remember getting pissed watching interviews with him in college. It's he doesn't answer their questions. And then it's yeah, wake the fuck up, bitch.
Yeah.
Read the Gospels again, because the guy that you worship never answered any of their questions either.
Right. Yeah. And the book came from such a place of love too. It was so obvious.
Yeah.
It was pure. The intentions behind it were so pure. and it just resonated with me on such a deep level. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And then I got into Roar and John Philip Newell, is that another? I think that's his name. Another guy, one of Rob's mentors, and just and really like just started just feeling like this. The world is opening up. Everything's making so much more sense. I feel more at ease and at peace than I ever have in my whole life. Like, addiction type behaviors and like fear and anxiety that I'd been dealing with for so long were really like, I could see like tangible shifts in these areas of my life. And just really wild stuff like that came of that. And the big fear for me, like the culture I grew up in was so performance based that, I always felt so afraid to be myself. Like I would be kind of found out in public. Like if someone heard me cuss or heard me say something, or they would be like, oh, I guess he's not really one of us, or I guess he's not who I thought he was. And this whole weird, like fucked up, like fantasy world where anyone's actually even gives a shit what I think. Like it's so weird. And
it's like a weird mix of pretension, right? Like that self-importance. Well, you mentioned that earlier, right?
It's what Casey was talking about earlier. Exactly. It's exactly the same thing. And that when that started to, fall away, I mean, if I heard myself saying fuck on a podcast, like right now, if my 8-year ago self heard that, I would be like mortified and shocked and like, and probably relieved too. But
yeah.
But I've come a long way, and right now, like where my theology or faith or whatever rests is I kind of like, and I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to say it anyway. But
it was my next question.
I like love atheists. Like I love reading atheists. I love Sam Harris is one of my favorite human beings that's ever lived. Like he's kind of my guru right now, and like. But I'm not. I don't feel any pressure to, like make some declarative proclamation that I am an atheist. Like, I tell people I'm an agnostic, and actually, Richard Dawkins in his latest book, he says because there's a scientific principle where you actually can't prove something doesn't exist. All true atheists are agnostic because they're not out to try to prove the existence of a higher power. And I do like some woo-woo, like spirituality stuff a lot, and it benefits me. But I definitely am in like the same camp as Sam right now, and where I do truly believe that the world would be a better place without any religion. I truly believe that the costs are more impacting than the benefits, like literally across the board of all religion. That like the best evolved place the human race could get to is one where the religion does not exist anymore at all. That's where I personally am. But I'm also trying to keep curiosity, open-mindedness, trying to stay a learner, trying to stay a beginner, trying to not get set in my ways and not have that, like, that's the reason that I named my new record Certainty, is because it's kind of a play. Like there is no such thing. Like that's not even what we're called. We're not called to be certain about stuff like this. Like it doesn't matter. There's nothing on the line. And that's what's so weird about the culture that I grew up in, is certainty is like the bedrock of that entire movement. Like we know what is true.
Yeah.
And that's such a burden to put on a human being, and it's such a
which is ironic.
Horrible.
Right? That's what they're trying to alleviate. They're trying to be like, the burden is unknowing, and you're like,
lay your burdens aside.
Yeah, the burden is the being unburdened is the day I realized no one is like calling me to know to decide or know or get to know. I don't even get to know. Why do I think that I get to know what happens when I die, or where the earth came from? Like what like why is that so important? Like who decided that is what like was such a priority or a virtue to get to know any of this shit? Like it's just such a relief. It's just like, oh, I can just start to sort of unravel all my insecurities and start to sort of be comfortable in my skin, and maybe try to like leave the world a slightly better place. Do cause more joy than suffering. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I am
love
with
it.
you 100% on a lot of that. Like, I've listened to Sam Harris some too. I think I heard him on Rogan like very early on in my like, I'm
Right.
not going to listen to like pseudo Christian talk radio anymore. I'm going to listen to some other things, and it's weird to think about how many people started their like quote unquote deconstruction or whatever you want to call it journey through podcasts, whether they're
Yeah.
related to Christianity or not. It's almost like, for me, it was almost like finding some people that were not at all connected to my background that I felt like I could trust,
Right.
or that I felt like I understood, like, okay, I see where this guy is coming from. And like,
And it seems like it's actually okay to be him too. Like there's nothing. It's like nothing's like burning down around his life because he's him. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
something reassuring about that. Like, oh,
We've-
maybe there is something else.
well, and
that's
for me, like,
okay.
that was one of the things that like really shook my confidence, or really exposed my lack of that's what it is. It exposed my lack of confidence that I was covering up in like my belief system, was like
Mhm.
really finding out that Christians don't have this monopoly on a meaningful, purpose-driven life.
Yes.
You know,
so well
you
put.
you don't have to like follow this set of rules to feel like your life it means something, or it's
Right.
it's fulfilling. And I think by finding some people that were for me, it was like finding people that were totally removed from Christianity that seemed to like have their selves together, like to have a good sense of self, which is what I was
Mhm.
lacking completely.
Absolutely. That was wrong. It was sinful. Like I convoluted like self-love with selfishness, and so many things like that. Like it's crazy. It's insane to think about. But yeah, focusing on yourself is like a fleshly, sinful thing. Like it never made any sense. It never tracked in any way, shape, or form. If I really am honest with myself, it never tracked.
Yeah, and so much of like what Christianity had become for me, like from an early point, when I look back on it, like I just never had warm fuzzies about any of it. I had this like unwavering like sense of duty to maintain the illusion that like I believe this and this is 100% true and I have confidence in this. And when I look back on it and when I was really honest with myself, I'm like, this is all performative. Like, when you were
Yes.
talking about earlier, like I was in a band in college and that was 100% of my identity. And I remember
Tooth
like,
and Nail really missed a good opportunity on that one.
yeah, you guys screwed up. But
Did you deliberately ignore their press kits or no?
it starts to feel that way. I remember like one of the guys in the band would like swear pretty openly, and I just remember like fretting about that, just like having like anxiety about the fact that like someone is going to hear him swearing and they're not going to like. It wasn't like, oh my God, what if somebody is hurt because of this, or what if somebody is like led astray because of this? It was all of it was about people are not going to think that we're genuine, and I want to seem like I'm genuine. I want to project ideal Christian guy, and none of it's real. It's all performative. I don't have any conviction about any of this stuff. What I have is guilt, and that's it.
Yeah, guilt, shame, desperate, like a desperate pleading. Like, I was talking to my therapist like last week about like, I mean, we were getting heavy. And I'm new with him. He's awesome, but like, there's the deep core sense of safety, right? Like we just want to feel safe. We want to feel like everything's okay. And like the message that I grew up with is everything is not okay. Like unless Are you sure you're right with God? Are you sure your name's in the book? Are you, maybe that guy was just never a believer because he backslid. Like maybe he just never was. Like,
That's some language there, man.
like
There's that
my
Carmen
mom,
song.
when I told my mom I wasn't a Christian anymore, and I'm not dissing you, Mom, if you listen to this, but I really doubt my mom's going to listen to this. She said, "Did you ever really know Jesus?" That was her response, and it broke my heart,
Yeah,
and I was like, no, Mom. I wanted to say no. Nobody does. Do you, like? Can you even define that for me? I don't even know if you could. And I'm not trying to offend anybody right now. If anyone listen, I'm really not. I sound like a total asshole right now, but I promise I'm not trying to be. But I tried to get my mom to read Love Wins. I was like, if you read that book, I will answer any questions you have about it. And she was like, "Oh, okay." And she didn't, to my knowledge, and I just wanted her to have a fraction of the experience I had from reading that book, so badly. But
I think one of the things that's wild and difficult, and as we try to figure all this stuff out, coming from the places that we came from, and fact is, people like us and the people who listen and so many other people are all stuck in this world of not, whether they're ex-Christian, ex-evangelical, post-Christian, progressive. Right. I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at it, but all of those words don't jive with the world that they grew up in. And of course, there's a disappointment and fear on the family's end for the people who are going in that,
of course,
in that direction. And it's so, everyone's kind of stuck in that, like that cycle of like, we're going to be surrounded by the version of the faith that we grew up in for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And this, other people don't have to deal with that. Yeah. And that's super interesting. Like you could, maybe
really interesting.
Maybe you come from an atheist family and become a Christian, and now there's that dynamic.
Right.
I doubt that maybe they have some of the witnessing at Thanksgiving that gets a little awkward. I don't know. But for the most part, like when you're talking, when I look at what's going on in the world, when you look at what people are talking about, politically speaking, right? Like 80% of even white evangelicals were like back to Trump and were not even reluctantly, it seems like they're like full blown on board and
fervently.
Kind of slapped, was a little bit of slap in the face of what you thought you grew up. Like I knew what I grew up with wasn't what I believed anymore. But when you saw them even betray those things, but still pretend like they were, those virtues and values mattered. That was honestly hurtful, I think, for a lot of people.
It was why I left church. The 2016 election is literally why I stopped going to church for the rest of my life. Yeah.
How many people had that exact same experience?
And I think that's why the Gospel Coalition's been harping on this whole thing for the last 4. It's like, well, wait, it's not all bad. We're some never Trumpers over here. Come join ours. It's like it's a little late for that. But also like, yeah, I don't know. We're in a weird time, like where it's blowing the fuck up. It really is in an unprecedented way. You can just look at the stats. There's a few people I follow on Twitter who just post stats and break them down well with charts and graphs. And it's like, God damn, the way that the world is shifting and moving. And it's tough. Like you just want all you want is for, you want your mom to read Love Wins. And it's like, that's not going to change anyone's life. It could be a catalyst, but it's just like, I'm inviting you to see and learn a little bit about what affected me and why I changed and why I am the way I am. And that's all that you were given. Like you were put into it. It's like all you did, all your mission as a Christian, as a kid, as a young kid who wanted to bring people into it, was like to invite people in. Oh, just read this New Testament, read the Gospel of John, read all you were. And now you do that from the other side, and you realize like that's frustrating and hurtful too, where it's like you're not even willing to meet people halfway. It's really not what you're about.
Yeah, it's interesting too. You just made me think about, I was so afraid, like I said earlier, to be authentic in a public space. And, I started to sort of like out myself as an ex-Christian on Facebook during the last election. And then since I've had this podcast, I've talked very openly about it. Actually, not as openly as I am on this. This is the most openly I've ever talked about it in a public space. But
it would be a real gift if we could be the podcast that ruined career.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be the only dude, if this podcast ruins my career, then fuck them. But the only responses I've gotten are other people that are going through the same thing I'm going through.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally the only thing. Like, it's been beautiful, like so awesome.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people going through the same thing that I'm going through. So that's my anecdotal like data on that metric, but it's like, it's obvious, this is like, I mean, I keep seeing online on some of the hilarious Instagrams that I follow, like, the church is freaking out right now about this. Like, they're totally like scrambling, like, and hopefully their business model will collapse completely. And that would be really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you talked about earlier, like having some empathy for the people that you grew up with and grew up around, and stuff.
Right.
I feel like what's hard to find is that ground where, like, because for me, like, I'm out 100%. And I consider myself an agnostic, but like what was freeing to me was not to say, I don't believe in any of this. It was more to say, like, I don't care about any of this anymore. Like, I don't care, and I don't have to care. And like, stop giving me books. Like, I don't care enough to read the book. I don't want to think about this anymore in like weigh it. It's not that I don't want to think about it at all. It's just that I don't want to continually weigh like my life's purpose and eternal destination against this book that you're handing me right now,
Totally. God.
And
yeah, that's great.
What's hard to find is like the balance with that, where, it took me a while to get to a point where I'm like, if you're a person who believes in anything, whatever it is, like, if you find meaning and comfort and happiness in being involved with the church and in believing in, Jesus as your personal savior and stuff like that, and it doesn't negatively affect the way that you behave towards other people. Because I mean, you can't control people's belief systems, and you know what?
Yeah.
If they're homophobic on the inside, what are we gonna do?
Right.
But if on the outside, at least they're friendly and kind and loving towards the people that they interact with. I don't know. I just do whatever you want. Do what makes you feel good and whole and feel a sense of meaning.
100%. I as I was kind of passing through the 5 stages of deconstruction, which I just made that up, but the resentment stage was the one that was the most difficult for me. But I came to a point one day. I remember, like, I really love the sentiment that, like, everyone's doing the best with what they have, with what their resources are, what they were given. And I remember thinking, like, if I really believe that, then I can't really. And this was also really liberating. Like, there isn't a person for me to blame for any of this. There really isn't. And I can't look at someone and be like, you stupid, ignorant idiot. Like, what are you? I can't do that. That's no different than how they treated other people, or how I treated other people. That's no different. And so, yeah, I 100% agree. And when I said, like, that I do believe that the world would be better without religion, I do believe that. But I also believe that that's not a realistic expectation. Right. And that I'm sure, like, I'm sure there are people out there that are very religious that are, like, really putting more good into the world than evil.
Yeah.
I don't know if I know any of them, and the fact, I'm sure I do, but the fact that I don't know that they are is probably something to do with it. You know what I mean? But yeah, I agree 100%. And I really, one of the reasons I've been hesitant to be really, like, transparent in this whole topic is because I really don't want to hurt anybody. I'm not trying to like I'm really don't get any satisfaction out of that at all. I mean, I do get satisfaction out of Christian Nightmares so much. Like, it's actually
Yes.
how I know about
So
this
fun.
podcast. It's like one of you commented on something, and I was like, "Oh, that seems cool," and that's how I started listening to your podcast.
That's awesome.
But I was actually gonna reach out to you guys before you reached out to me, and say like, "Hey, we should do a podcast."
Oh,
so
sick.
Now
man.
I
pretty
am
crazy.
glowing.
Yeah. Dude,
But,
I
yeah.
love it. Thank you.
We got a Christian Nightmares episode 2 coming out tomorrow.
Oh, I'm
and
excited.
We're so excited about it.
I think it came out great. We're pumped about it. The one thing I want to say, and I know we've been going on for a while, so we can kind of wrap up. But when you talk about a world without religion, it's funny because one of the things that I think about, I think about that a lot. That's one of the
Mhm.
things that's kind of on my mind a bit because I still participate in a Christian religion.
Yeah.
However, I don't. It's tough for me to parse out in a few words what that means
Right.
to me and why I do. But the community that I have is meaningful to me.
Right.
And if it
Absolutely.
disappears, I don't have a backup plan. There's no church that I'm like, well, let's just replace it. Right. It's
For sure.
and what I
forecast crystals.
what I hear you saying and what I've been thinking of is like religion it just feels like the mechanism for control.
Mhm.
Like you can have a meaningful life of faith and you can form a little group, and if that works for you, great. But what I feel like when you look at religion as a whole, there's all these, I don't know, I'm about to maybe shoot my own argument in the foot here, but it's like, I came from non-denominational land, which was there is no hierarchy. There is no oversight. That's Mark Driscoll land, right? There's just an asshole at the top saying a bunch of bullshit and hurting a lot of people, and then rising from the ashes to be a piece of shit again. Like, I don't. There's no good way around that. That's trash, and it's a net negative for the world. And then you go, but then you look at oversight, right? And you look at denominations and the way that like the Southern Baptist Convention works. You look at even the Catholic Church has a myriad of issues, and any sort of high church structure has its own problems. So I started trying. I honestly started this thinking that maybe like the concept of like the structure is what the problem is, right? Like a religious control. You look at historically speaking in the way that the Catholic Church has been in bed with empire and
For sure.
controlled the narrative of salvation. But then you look at what non-denominationalism does and how that creates Mark Driscolls and things like that. And then you look at maybe this is, I think what's shitty is, you know what it is? I bet if you just get rid of religion completely, now you have like, maybe politics becomes like people are always going to like gravitate towards something and be controlled by something and want simple answers for complex questions. And
yes, 100%.
I don't know. All
100%.
I'm saying, I'm not trying to even refute anything. I think I'm saying that I feel stuck. I honestly feel stuck and confused. And
I
like,
totally get that. And
where are we going?
I agree with everything you just said. And not that matters, but I do think, that there's this inherent need for tribalism in us. It's really destructive. And like, us against them, we're in the in group. Those are the out group, that whole thing is permeated both sides of the political spectrum right now, like in a really dangerous way. And also my experience is very limited. Like I'm not an expert on world religion and historical. I could meet someone from some other country that had a complete an experience in religion that I've never even heard of before. But the arguments I've heard for just sort of the net negative of religion as a whole are very compelling, and
you're right
they resonate with me on a deep level. The guy that I was talking about earlier, John Philip Newell, he's sort of an expert in pre-empire Celtic Christianity. And
very specific.
Yeah, and it's really beautiful. I mean, it is like nothing like the kind of Christianity that we were raised with. I mean, it literally couldn't be more different. And I've read one of his books and about half of another one of his books, and he is just a sage. I mean, he's a mystic. I think he even identifies as like a Christian mystic. And that kind of shit is awesome. Like, I love it. I mean, I'm not gonna like change my kind of where I'm sitting right now as far as my beliefs go based on it, but like I completely back that dude and like what he's trying to do, like so hard. And yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a tricky situation. I wouldn't ever want to like rob someone of some sort of sense of community or purpose or anything. That's that would be horrible. That would be like monstrous to want people to be robbed of that. I personally never really felt connected to a community in a church. I always felt outside. I always felt like I was like not fitting in, and they were all getting something that I didn't get. Like I just didn't get it, and I felt it actually kind of made me feel worse about myself, to be completely honest.
I am.
So
I
it
am
was
with you
easy.
100%.
It was easy for me to be like, bye.
There's,
Man.
it's funny, like talking about this stuff. So when you, I have this thought that's like stuck in my head that I continually think about, where, when people start talking about like evolution and humans, being like an evolutionary anomaly, and has this ever happened before on other
Right.
planets? Is there life out there and stuff? I always have this thought that like, what if we're inevitable? Like, what if evolution inevitably leads to some sort of a sentient being that is just sort of dominates the rest of the life in their realm, But I think that like some of the stuff you guys are talking about, like the propensity for religions to turn into this tribalistic, self-protecting organism that inevitably strays way far from their core principles in an effort to protect themselves and grow their own institution. I think that that's really just a characteristic of human institutions in general. Whether we're talking about like governments, corporations, whatever it is, like
100%.
Institutions naturally protect themselves and prioritize growth above all things, and they will compromise their principles to keep growing and increasing the influence of their organization. Right? They naturally need oversight and accountability, and they naturally resist those things. And religion is just another one of those things, and corporations are like a more recent development, but they do the exact same thing. I mean, like, look at I mean, how many times did you hear conservative Christian leaders like make jokes about liberal Starbucks doing this, that, or the other, and how ridiculous
with
they
their
were
Christmas cups.
Yeah, exactly.
Or their straws, or whatever.
And you look at like at Starbucks, what they're doing right now to try to resist unionization and undermine it and stuff. Like audio just leaked of them talking openly about how they're going to try to undermine this push to unionize, their staff and stuff. It's the same. It's the same. Whenever you've got a group of humans all working towards a common goal, I feel like that's what we naturally do. And it's the tribalism we were talking about. It's just a natural function of it. And it's just something that, regardless of whether we're talking about a company or a government or a religion, it is always going to require people either on the outside or on the periphery of it to try to hold it accountable, and a lot of times unsuccessfully, because that's where it's going to trend.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think you're bringing up a couple points. I think that the thing under the thing of all of this is like natural evolutionary components gone amok, right? So like it's kind of like how like anxiety, chronic anxiety is such a thing in the Western world especially. But the reason we feel anxious is a survival instinct. It's something that actually protected us, that kept us alive, that like kept our species from dying, right? And I think that at the core of all this is just this desire for safety and survival, right? But it's just
like
gone
if
amok.
You have
it's
to take
evolved.
a dump in the woods, you're always looking over your shoulder for a saber-toothed tiger.
Exactly. And I think like on an institutional level, I'm not saying like every single person involved. I think there is like real greed and evil and addiction and mental like health even stuff that goes into a lot of this stuff, especially in church and in politics. But on an institutional level, the core kind of thing that's driving these communities is a sense of wanting everything to be okay. It's just gotten really mutated. Like everything to be okay for a billionaire means like getting more money or whatever. Like I don't know what I don't understand.
Things seem
that.
pretty okay for them now. It's hard.
Yeah,
to
but like
being more okay.
I can understand how like my instincts to want to survive and be okay and protect myself and feel safe. I've seen those anecdotally in my life spin out into really destructive things. And so I get that on an institutional level, how that happens. So this is more, and that's what's beautiful about it is I think this type of thinking even comes from a different place. It comes from a place of compassion, curiosity, empathy. And I'm really shitty at all of those things I just said, but except for the curiosity part. But at least I'm like trying and I'm aware of it, and I'm trying to be a little bit better version of myself every day than I was yesterday. And I never got that from religion. I never got that from Christianity. That was not like a priority or virtue. I remember that and I can wrap with this. This is just crazy, but I remember like I was reading something or going through something, and I was starting to think about that I had never really established my own set of values based on like who I really am, like in my body and in my heart and in my mind and my soul, like who I am. And I remember like looking up the definition of values, and it was like, it's what you value. And I was like, oh, I never really thought of it that way. And the reason is because my values weren't what I value. They're what I had to value. They're what like I was supposed to value in order to be okay in the eyes of the church or the eyes of other Christians or God or whatever.
To fit in.
So I remember that was like a revelation, like, oh, I get to decide what I value. I get to like actually really try to like suss out like what's in there and what's important to me. And it was like, oh shit, I have to do that. But it's also beautiful, at the same time. So.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. I love it. I think even you talking about value, it's like I was thinking about that just today. Was like, because this is what people are thinking about as we're rolling up on holiday season and spending time with people. You're like, you realize how complicated it gets spending time with groups of people who have such different value systems, and that's like such a. It doesn't have to become a problem, and I think maybe one of the better. Maybe the pinnacles of human evolution would be to like not always let those things get in the way. But they do. Even to your point, Casey, talking about like the people on the outside, the peripherals of society who are pushing against, whether it's the corporations, the institutions. Like, I think that's what was attractive to me and still is about Jesus. And you can find this in other people, and that's fine. People should find it where they can. But it was like, the way that he came up against the concepts of empire and the concepts of religious structures that keep people out, and the way like to me, like those are the things that I do value. So I think that's why I'm still attracted to those ideas, and why I can still sit in the world that I do, is because it's like I believe in that, and it's I don't believe in religious structures or repeat after me's or these institutions that harm people. And I think that the ultimate point to me is like, we talk about how damaging it was to say Christ died for your sins, and you did this, and that's because we're all awful. And then he came back, and now everything's great. It's like, this is the natural outcome of pushing against those things. Do you want to be like that? Do you want to pick that up or not? Like, and it's up to you. But to me,
I think that's beautiful, man. I really do think that's beautiful.
It's what resonates with me, but
that's great. And I love that. I honestly do. And I celebrate that with you. Like I truly do, even though that's not where I'm at. I've watched too many Bart Ehrman videos or something, but I don't know if you've ever watched him, but he's one of my other favorite people.
I'll check him out now.
Yeah. He's a badass dude.
I like the way that Jesus copy and pastes fish. and toast.
Yeah. Copy and control.
That resonates with me.
C and control V's. Yeah, that's dope.
I like how he makes Boone Farm out of Lake water too.
Aaron, tell us about what you're up to, where we can find you. You obviously just put out a new album. You have two. You had two new albums coming out on the same day. One's your solo project. One's you got going on.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what you got going on.
Well, so I put out a lot of music through the company. I work full time for a company called Soundstripe. I'm a full time composer there. It's a music licensing company, and I make music for their catalog for their customers, and videographers and YouTubers and TV shows and ads and all that stuff. And they release all the music I make. So sometimes it will come out. I don't even really have anything to do with when it comes out. It just does. And one of the projects I do there is one called, that I have with one of the other guys there named Adrian, and we have a project called Snowbones, and it's really like our love of like British, British music, like 90s and 2000s British, like alt pop kind of, I guess. And I sing in that, and it happened to accidentally come out the same day as my like quote unquote real record that I have been working on for like 2 years. So and that is under my name, Aaron Sprinkle, and it's called Certainty, and you can stream it anywhere that you can stream stuff. And if you want to buy a vinyl or a CD or a cassette, you can go to my website, aaronsprinklemusic.com. There's actually 5 bonus tracks on the EP, so it actually is more like an LP. And nice. Yeah, and
it's a great album too, man. I listened to it a few times the other day, and it's really fantastic.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, I was really going for a specific kind of vibe, kind of a throwback thing for me. And then I'm starting to play out again. I don't know when this podcast is going to be out, but I have a show next month in Kansas City with Emery and Aaron Marsh from Copeland on December 10th. And I'm excited. I really have not played out for a long time, and I'm going to be focusing on that more. And then I have a podcast also called Moon Traveling with my co-host Matthew Schwartz, and we've only put out I think 6 episodes so far, but the response has been really good, and it's been really fun. And
it's great. I listened to that too. I got it. Cool. I got the first couple episodes. One of the things I love that you did is you guys had an AMA on that, and people ask a lot of music questions, the things that we didn't quite get to this time around. Yeah. Not that you haven't answered that a million times. I know that, like the fan in me of all the stuff you've worked on wanted to ask a bunch of the same questions you've probably answered a million places.
Well, I'd be happy to come back on, but I wanted to talk about the juicy
I love
shit.
this. This was a lot of fun. I was glad we got to get to know you a little bit. And
man, I am really honored and just really grateful. This has been just such a fun experience, and
thank you. Yeah,
wants
this is
to
so much fun for us.
Hit me up on Instagram too. It's just Aaron Sprinkle. If you hear this and want to talk about it, that's a good place to reach.
Awesome. Yeah. So everyone, check out his new music. Check out his podcast. It's great. And I guess I don't have anything else. Casey, what? Until next time?
Until next time. Thanks for
listening. Appreciate you guys.
We will catch you later.